So how you been doing? It's been a while since we
Good.
spoke, actually.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know, a few months, right? I guess since it's on voice comms, it's been a long time. I don't know.
I don't even remember
Still,
last time we called each other. Jesus.
it's like 6 months, I think. Six
That
months,
long?
maybe. I don't know. It's been a while. Yeah.
Oh, I'm scrolling through our chat right now. Oh god, I don't even know.
Well, because I mean, prior to like 6 months ago, whenever we talked, it was probably like a few years because I wasn't really into the PoE scene. I was like playing for like a week and then not really enjoying the state of the game and then leaving. But I'd say I guess like the past 6 months to a year, I've really kind of come back to PoE and really enjoyed myself.
Yeah. First message I sent to you on Discord was,
When was it?
if you want to see how squad streamer looks prior to the Warcraft 3 Reforged.
Reforged. No. No, I'm so sad. I was literally playing Warcraft 3 yesterday.
Oh shit, but that was 2019. I seriously haven't sent you a PM on Discord before that. I mean, shit,
We
you.
talked like a year ago about, or like 8 months ago about like method stuff. You remember?
Yeah, I
That
remember
was the last
that.
time I remember. That was the most recent time I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the next part. But like on Discord, I know you're terrible at responding on Twitter.
Don't ever Twitter me. Don't. That's not a thing that exists ever.
I remember you
The
telling me that.
literal The literal only reason I have a Twitter is because Zeno made me make a Twitter when I went to TwitchCon so we could like actually communicate with people. But I
Uh,
don't really go to TwitchCon anymore, so my Twitter doesn't really have a use.
yeah, that's fair. I
That's
remember we
why,
talked about that.
yeah, whenever like my account got hacked and they hacked my Twitter, I was literally like, you do whatever you want with my Twitter. I really don't care about it. And then they just gave it back to me because they were annoyed that they couldn't do anything with it.
That's one way of doing it, I guess.
It worked.
But it's kind of weird though that I've only sent you a message on PMs on Discord 2019 because I mean we've been
I thought we spoke through
several
Discord. What did
times.
we speak through?
I don't remember. Like the State of Exile podcast. What is that? 7 years ago? 8 years ago?
Yeah. You know what I think it was? I think it's because we just called each other after like a method meeting or something like
Yeah, or
that.
just
I'm
had
pretty
like
sure
group
that's what happened.
conversations, right?
Yes. Yeah, and from the group conversation to a private conversation. That's probably what
Yeah.
happened.
So I don't think we had any direct PMs between each other. It's weird. It just looked weird. The past 8 years, we've only talked with other people around. I mean, are we that scared of each other?
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't talk to much people in general.
That's fair. That's fair. So, how are you enjoying being back in PoE, so to say, right now?
I like it a lot. I like it a lot actually. There are definitely still some things that linger around why I kind of got really frustrated with PoE back when I played hardcore before I stopped. Like the biggest thing with Arc Nemesis that I don't like is on death effects, ironically. It's just still something that I can't get out of my head where you kill a monster, it drops loot, you go to pick up the loot, and then you die.
Yeah. No, it's not the best of experiences.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me see if I can get all the settings ready. How's the sound chat for Mr. POHX? Is it good? We need to lower him, raise him. Everything's fine. What's the play?
Sounds good.
I like the sound of that. It's good. Jesus Christ. It's almost like I'm getting good at this. Almost. Holy shit. Oh, we have another couple of minutes. Do you have any time limitations? Anything you got to do, or you're open?
No, I'm open. I just figure whenever this is done, I'll just go stream. So if it's like 2 hours long, it's fine. If it's only 1 hour, it's fine. So
Yeah.
if is it going to go past 2 hours? I mean, if there's still stuff to talk about, sure.
Well, let me just see. I was thinking about 22 hours or something.
22 hours? Okay, I may have to change some dates on my schedule.
We don't really have any time frames. So for those of you in chat who haven't seen this before, they happen quite irregularly. These type of podcasts. It's basically what we're doing is we're calling it the sit down podcast because all I'm doing is calling up a friend. This time I'm calling up POHX, a good friend of mine in the PoE community, streamer community rather, since you haven't always been in PoE, I guess. And we're just going to talk about a main topic, and today that's going to be about Path of Exile. We might nibble a little bit about the Diablos fiasco that's been happening, but mostly we'll be talking about Path of Exile today. And that's it. We don't have any questions, no red thread to follow, no structure, nothing. I'm just going to talk to POHX about things, and we'll just see where the conversation leads. If he has anything nice or anything fun or interesting he wants to bring up, he'll do that, and I'll do the same, and it's just a friendly conversation. That's literally it. It's a conversation between two friends, and we'll see where that leads. Essentially, that's literally it. So,
conversation between two friends.
Yeah, and you guys get to listen and you get to eavesdrop essentially. But I mean, we've had a couple of shows with this. I'm not sure if I want to call it show, but we have had a couple of episodes with this type of podcast, and it seemed to work out pretty well. It's really lean back and.
I like content like this that's not. I mean, most content I would say is not scripted these days on stuff that I go on, but like when there's not pressure, just relax, just talking about video games, right?
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Very simple.
It's kind of nice since, like, I mean, we're both passionate about RPGs in general.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, I remember when we had Creparian on the show, I think we spent like an hour talking about Dominating Blow. We got so stuck in that topic. That's all we
just
talked
Dominating
about.
Blow.
Yeah, just Dominating Blow for an entire hour. We had two different approaches to it. All we did was just talk about
I mean, that's kind of how crazy PoE is, though, right? Like, I wrote a whole Wikipedia on one skill gem because there's just like so much depth to everything in Path of Exile if you really kind of like dissect it.
Yeah. Oh, that's the fun part about it, and it's like I can remember myself when I was in school. We're almost the same age. You're a little younger than me, right? Like when you went to school and everybody played World of Warcraft, right? And that was like the only thing everybody talked about. You came to school and they were like, "Oh yeah, I got this much rating in the arena," or "I did this. I killed that boss with my raid last night." And everyone in the class be like, "Oh, that's fucking dope, dude." The teacher's trying to teach something in the front, everyone in the back talking about WoW. Dude, it was crazy. But it was like, and then, you know, as you start working a real job, as people call it, and not streaming, and you have coworkers, you always find like someone's playing games, you talk with them, and it's all about whatever games we're playing, right? And then as a streamer, that all of that just kind of, you know, disappeared. There's no coworkers you meet when you sit in front of the computer to talk about these things. That's kind of why I like this kind of podcast, because it lets me have that opportunity to just talk shit about a game and just see where it goes, right? So it's that conversation.
Dude, I actually only worked 2 jobs outside of streaming. I worked my first job right after I graduated high school in 2011. I worked for 3 months to earn money to build a streaming computer. And then when I moved out and I wasn't earning enough income, I had to work a second job while I was streaming. And then that was it. So I've been streaming now, I think almost 10 years.
Jesus.
It's just been my income.
It's been about 8 years for me. I worked as a sales person. I moved away from my parents' place when I was 17. So long story short. So I had to work at the same time as I went to school to pay for rent and everything. So I went to school, chose which classes I could pass without going to them. So I skipped those to go to work so I could pay for my shit.
That's very similar to my story.
Yeah. And then I actually got to the point where I worked as a key account manager, made a shitload of money, but I didn't like the work. And then I was bouncing a couple of jobs after that. And then eventually I started streaming. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And I started making money. It's like, okay, well, this could be fun to see where this leads me. And I worked a lot with part-time jobs on the side as I was streaming. And and a couple of years back is where I officially went full time, if you will. So it's been quite a ride having bouncing part-time jobs on the side of streaming. It's super messy to schedule that, but now that you're in a full-time streaming situation, it's it's just as stressful as always.
Yeah. Honestly, though, I have to say I used to not really like PoE for a streaming game, but what do you think about it? I kind of like it because every 3 months, no matter the state of the game, there's always a surge of new players. So even if the state of the game is horrendous, if you can find joy in it, there's growth for you, which is really, really unique, I would say, for a game.
It's definitely awkward. I recently hit a new record for my channel as well last month, and so yeah, it was really cool actually. But something I'll never get used to is I like the idea of the growth, and then it's, you know, from a business streamer perspective, it's a lot about maintaining as much of that as possible as the month goes on, and PoE goes in these 3-month cycles, right? So it's not that fun to see everything drop in the month after, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Believe me, I know. You play PoE, you hit your all-time highest. Like for me, it was not as high as you, but I hit like 2,000 this league.
That's crazy.
And then I take Sundays off, right? So I took Sunday off, and I wake up in the morning and I look at my dashboard. I'm like, why does it say 1650? I'm like, where did 25% of the people go overnight? But that's how PoE works, right? It's super streaky, and like the few days right before league start, even during league start, absolutely high highs, low lows.
Yeah, no, it's really hard to get used to. So it's like, from a business perspective, it's like you gotta make sure that that month counts so that it covers the second and third, and then pray they don't fuck us over by adding a 4th month to a league.
Yeah, that's true. That it's so difficult sometimes, right? Like, how do you find joy? Sorry, it sounds like I'm the one asking the questions here. How do you find the will to, like? So as a guy who only plays like one skill, right? Like I've played more than one skill, but I thoroughly enjoy the character progression. So it doesn't actually matter what skill I'm playing. I just want to know it inside out. So I feel like I have these progression points in my head, and it just feels really good to achieve those miniature goals, right? Like I know the second I get my 6-link for RF, I know exactly what's going in there. I don't have to go back to town, mess around with support gems, look for alternate quality. Like I know already what I want, right? For you, what is it that keeps you centered around playing minions all the time?
It's a bit more than the comfortability about it, actually. Like when I started, I remember when you and Seno invited me to the State of Exile podcast. It was just before I killed Uber Siri as a minion player, right? And I was the only one in the entire community that had done it as a minion build, that is, which was
the Moth Pit crew
absolutely
is blessed to have such a VIP member aboard.
So it was like in a situation where I like the competitiveness of gaming, because I played esports before with like Dota 2. I played in a team called GPG, so I like this whole the push idea of gaming in general and trying to be the best I can at it. And no one's done it with minions, and minions and ARPG was always the kind of Necromancer Diablo 2 kind of esque play style that I loved. So that's where I started. But the more I dove into Path of Exile, the more advanced the minion era was compared to the other builds, so to say. Like you said, as soon as you start dissecting it, there's so much to it. And from my perspective, the minions had more of these things they had to think about, because they had all of these side mechanics that indirectly affects minions, right? And that was fun. But as the more I played, the more my eyes opened, if you will. I mean, a couple leagues back, they changed the mana reservation percent, or the mana cost percent multiplier.
That changes everything.
On unbound ailments. And I was like, oh, this is big. And everyone was sitting like fucking question marks, being like, what are you talking about, Ghazzy? I'm like, it's just massive. This is like so much damage for us. And everyone was like, what the hell's going on? I'm like, yeah, this is why I love this game. So they nerfed the specters. They did that change. And in the end, we had more damage. So I was like, and it's not like GG always picks it up. So that's kind of like what keeps me going with it. But nowadays, it's not much changing now. There's very few things that are changing, to be honest. But nowadays, it's more about that keeps me going, has more to do with the fact that I've kind of categorized myself in a position where people come to me for minion related knowledge. and we aren't really that many people in the community that dives in and tests minions properly. So we end up having it's Cade, it's me, we have Ethan, Von Victon, and that's basically the best or the biggest names in the community that test summoners properly. And even then, the tests is very limited. So what I'm trying to do is fill the gaps. I do the things I do, and then I try to cover all the other stuff. Like I did a wolf build recently, and after I did a Herald of Purity build, because there's very little information about these things. So I want to cover that, and then I can move on. So after today's podcast, I'm going to play a magic fight character just to not play minions, because I'm done with all the minion stuffs, right? But it's I think it's more about making sure that I fill the gaps of everything within my category, and then I'm starting to nibbling outside of it. Not sure really what's keeping me going, because I'm enjoying it, I guess.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I can understand that. I mean, I think it was last league, I leveled 4 RF builds to 100, each with a different flavor. One of them was a champion. Then I restarted in SSF, leveled RF to 98, killed Maven, got my boots. Then we did a private league where I actually played Bone Shatter. I played a melee build. But then Gauntlet came around, then I played RF to 90 in Gauntlet. And just throughout the entirety of it, it was just fun, right? I didn't need a reason. It was just fun. I thoroughly enjoyed the building process. I guess this league, though, I'm a little bit not as interested as getting so many hundreds, just because it doesn't feel like the state of the game has changed too much for me. It feels still really good, but I guess there wasn't enough change.
That's fair. You know, I've always stopped caring about the level of my character when I hit 92. That's kind of like my breaking point, because it's really fast to get to 92 if you're effective, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
93, 94, a little bit of work, but after 95, okay, you gotta make sure you don't die, you know?
Yeah.
Outside of hardcore, obviously. But no, I stopped at 92 because it's like one of those achievable levels that new and newer players can achieve by just playing the game. And it's okay if the character dies every now and then. You can still achieve 92 because you don't get that experience penalty isn't that hard. So most of my build guides, they stop their character between 92 and 93. That's I don't really go higher than that. And if
Makes sense.
Yeah, and so if anyone does, I'm like, you just get some more jewel slots. It's fine. My usual answer. But lately I've been pushing a lot of crafts like I always do, but I've been pushing currency as another goal to add to the list that I'm doing. Not that it's going very well this league. Lost 20 House of Mirrors this league so far. So that wasn't that fun. But that aside, I started using Mate's Bloods out of quality of life, actually. You get more damage than minion builds with Darkness Enthroned. You can get better EHP through other sources. Well, not EHP, but better energy or life through other sources. But Mage Blood can, with a flask setup, give you so much defensive layers and the speed from the Quicksilver. It's just so comfortable. So I've been starting to use that on my, since I do one mid-max character every league. So I started using that, and I just accidentally get to level 100 sometimes. And I accidentally level, and that means my character's between 95 and 100. No matter what I do, and if I'm playing that character. But making more than one? Hell no. Do you remember your first level 100 character, by the way?
I do. Yeah, it was... Well, actually, I don't remember which it was. It was either my Berserker character, the hardcore RF Berserker, or the Blight character. What came first? Hold on. Breach or Harbinger?
Breach. Oh, wow. Must be Breach, right? Oh, your webcam? There we go. You're back.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Breach or Harbinger? Chat is
As
saying
times
Breach.
2, Pog? Okay, yeah. So it was Breach or Harbinger. Breach was Abyssal Cry, which now is reworked into Infernal Cry with Blight. And it was so broken that you would literally... You know how corpse scaling works, right? Yeah. So you would just use Abyssal Cry, and you would put poison on hit, and you would use it. And no matter what is in the middle, it's dead. Like, you could have Shaper in a T2 map, and if it's surrounded by white mobs and your Abyssal Cry pops, Shaper would theoretically die from poison stacking. Like, he would just die. And it leveled with a... Oh my god, what is that? Cane of Unraveling? Is that what it's called? What? There's a... No, not... Sorry?
The chaos staff?
It wasn't even a chaos staff. It's one that starts your ES recharge when you block. What is that called? It's a staff. It's really old. I'm pretty sure nobody uses it now.
Oh,
God.
oh, I know which one you're talking about. It's something with it had like a lightning theme, right? Wasn't it the name?
I'm gonna go look at this weapon. Anyway, I used this weapon to level 100 because I was like max block, and basically you would block and then it would trigger your recharge, and then your explode from, oh, then you'd have Wicked Ward on top of that, so you'd have this constant buffer. Zergle's Crank, that's what it was.
Here it is. Yeah,
I did Zergle's Crank to level 100 in hardcore.
It has reflect lightning damage to melee attackers. That's why I thought it was
okay, sorry, I guess you were right, but I never knew about that mod.
Oh man, but isn't there another Seagirls? Not just a staff, right? Or is it just a staff?
I don't know. I was about to say, is there like a replica? Do I have to level a new character to 100?
No replica. But yeah, you know for sure it's one of those things that pretty much nobody uses, but it does have an extra layer of block chance to attacks.
Yep. And the 20% chance for energy shield recharge to start when you block, and then that doesn't end until Wicked Ward, and then it just loops basically. So
that's pretty cool, actually.
I actually was looking. Go on.
My first level 100 was actually. I made a couple of characters when I started playing 8 years ago, and then eventually I ended up with one main character, which, you know, when I started playing the game, I played with Chevron since that was the meta back then. Low life, 1500 energy shield, several thousands of deaths, you know, in a new player experience. I decided to bring that character up to level 100. I did. Back in those days, the highest area level map you could do was 78, I believe. Palace maps.
I think you're right. Palace. Yep.
Did rotation groups and watched people level 99 die to a crit Frost Nova box. It was.
Yep.
Well, I brought
Exiles.
Yeah. Oh. Dude.
Exile. Natalie, what is the one that shoots explosive arrow or lightning arrow? I had a minion build that got hit for 13,000 back like in original PoE beta. I will never forget. It was an LA weakness map. I had Purity of Elements. Yeah, I had Purity of Elements on. I turned it off to resummon a zombie, turned it back on, and then got hit for like literally like all my ES went away, and I was just sitting at low life. I was like, oh my goodness. No.
Oh man.
My first summoner.
But that was in hardcore, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because I remember
all my early experiences are HC.
After that level 100 character, like it took a long time back then as well. Jesus, unless you were pushing, you know, in the team and whatnot. I just did rotation groups. This was standard league actually, because that was really popular back then to play. But then I started playing leagues. I went over to my 5-year period in hardcore, and I think my highest level in hardcore was in hardcore trade, as that was the race meta back then. I think I had a character in 90 something. I don't remember which league it was. I do remember that every single character, when we purchased a Taste of Hate, I was dead within the next 6 or 7 maps on every character that entire league.
There's a curse. I had a curse too. If I went into an Untainted Paradise below level 70, I was destined to die on that character at some point after. I don't know why. If I ran early Untainted, I died.
Untainted, that's good times. That's Mightiest Fallen from Grace kind of approach in that one. They were still good, but not as good. I remember this. It was BV or EK Nova. I think it was EK Nova meta with the Inquisitor when we spec'd all the way from the left, took a walk from Shire all the way to Mordor on the right hand side for face acro. And yeah, right. I told my team. I think we had a buddy of mine playing Aurabot and he died 12 times at Lee. It's 12 or 13. It was crazy. I told the other team, because since he was dead, we jumped into another team who had an Aurabot to play with them to keep up with the race. And what happened was that I told him, the guy was rolling the maps, there is one thing I can't do, and that is invasion bosses. I can't do invasion. They will kill me. And it's like, okay, great. He rolled Sextants. And one of those sections has that the map has one invasion boss, and there's only one invasion boss that I can't handle. And I didn't notice till the second map in, because I shield charge like a little bit away from my Arbot, and in front of me is this big ass penis looking motherfucking shrapnel bearer. And I just see the green things come popping around.
And you just, die. Yep.
Instantly. That was the third map after I purchased Taste of Fate. So, he killed me.
Honestly, Invasion was so crazy. I remember playing Invasion League in hardcore, and gosh, like my first character ironically never died, but I was fully defensive, and everything was so rippy because back then it was pre-nerfed like shotgunning, so shotgunning was in its truest form. And I remember seeing like that. Do you remember that Devourer that would shoot ball lightnings? And if you had your map mod with like multi-proj, I literally remember opening a portal, having 6 people jump in. Within us fighting 3 mobs, the Devourer popped up, shot that ball, stun locked 4 people to death. The other guy blinked out, then died, and I got out safely. And I'm just like, my God, this is like a tier 2 map, white. Or no, sorry, there's just like a GMP mod, which, you know, we didn't know about how deadly a lot of this stuff was back in the day. Or even, do you remember the dogs with GMP? You would just get melted instantly.
The fire ones?
Instantly. Or? Yeah, the Incinerate dogs, because each tick of Incinerate would get multiplied, and the only people that could tank those were old school Arctic armor builds.
Yep. So it's the game has come a long way since then. Let's put it that way.
It really has.
And
it really has.
The shotgun fixed was pretty good, except for collateral splashes and secondary explosions from proj from monsters. So that's a bit of a shame. And then obviously the Syndicate operative era, spent a year playing that. That was honestly, I'm happy they fixed it, because it's like something that I noticed with fast forward into recent times with Path of Exile. This league, they chose not to do any nerfs or buffs, right? And it, to me, as I played Meixsell last league, I want to play one meta minion build every league as a start with. And I played Meixsell last league. I played Meixsell this league, and you know, it's fun to know exactly what to do, all the progression and what steps to do. That's always nice. But it to me, it just reminded me so much about the fact that I played 3 or 4 leagues in a row. At least started with Syndicate operatives, because they were just so goddamn good. And it just reminded me how valuable changes to the game actually is for the enjoyment. Like, I understand that no buffs, no nerfs. You know, not talking about Arch Nemesis, because that kind of was devastating anyways, but looking at the character specifically, like having buffs and nuffs actually forces people out of their way to do something different or approach even if the same build. I don't care if it's the same build, as long as I have to do some changes to it to accommodate to whatever nerfs or buffs they do, makes the game more enjoyable for me. I'm not sure if you're in the same boat, because I felt kind of bored being in the same boat again.
Yeah. No, I am entirely, because the art of discovery is not there, and the only discovery right now is like through crafting, but crafting just makes you stronger. It's not really like unlocking new mechanisms or mechanics unless you're doing something specific. But last league, for example, you know, played standard RF build, had fun. We noticed Fire Trap got a buff, so I sent some of my buddies to go investigate. Lo and behold, an entire new single target gem, you know, appeared for Righteous Fire, and like RF itself had no changes. Like if you RF like last league, the ping ping ping, nothing. But because of changes they did to other stuff, we got to completely redo like the literal whole progression of our build, because we have a new single target, right? And that's awesome, being able to discover that, mold your new gear around that, adjust your play style around that, switch to full life tap gems. You know, new Watcher's Eye opens up. Skitterbot is a double multiplier. Like, there's just so many things that, like you said, kind of change just with even slight patch notes, because we don't know how it's going to affect all these different builds, right?
No, I like that. Like, this such a small thing that has nothing to do with the build you're playing makes such a huge impact on it. That's one of the best things about Path of Exile, in my opinion, and also one of the reasons why I love Minions so much, because the smallest change, like I mentioned earlier with Unbound Ailments, the mana multiplier got changed. I think it was 20% or something, and that was enough to make it suddenly something want to slot in a socket-starved minion build. Like, we want that. We gotta make sure we fit that somehow, because that's a ton of damage. And when it comes to minions specifically, when it comes to progression, for example, we have a lot of other mechanics that people don't seem to think about. People smacking a skitterbot because they get shock and chill. You can put bone shield support on it and stuff like that. And a certain level of gear, if your minions can apply shock and shield themselves, like mage skeletons, there are thresholds to where you can see that, well, my skeletons are shocking more than what skitterbots is applying, and that means they're also going to be applying the chill without needing skitterbots. Suddenly we can drop that, get some more RMR, and we can now use Zealotry. And still keep a defensive approach with Defiance Banner and Determination, for example, or just remove it entirely and add Grace for even better defense. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can progress with, and things like the Righteous Fire build that got so heavily changed by something that had nothing to do with it. I don't know, it's just so cool, right? You get to dive into the build, the designing of it, get to, go back to the drawing board and look at the new way of approaching it, and then comparing that to the classic way that people are used to. Which one is better, and then go from there. Are they about the same? Well, they two offer now two different playstyles of something that is essentially in its core design the same, but the playstyle is slightly different. I don't know, it's just absolutely amazing to have that approach to the game. And then when we go from 317 into 318, they'd be like, there's no nerfs to change or buffs. And people were like, yay, we get to play RF, EA, Skellies. It's the same thing. We're going to get Ashes at the start. Oh, wait, not Ashes. We're going to get Omni. No, wait, not Omni. But, it's like they get to do these things, and they're happy about it. And as I started playing, I was like, I'm kind of done within a few days. But then again, we also have to keep in mind that streamers play an obnoxiously unhealthy amount of hours, obviously.
Very true. Yeah.
So
I mean, also, to be fair, for the community, if I didn't have this like surefire guaranteed there are no nerfs, I wouldn't have been able to put out the information I put out for my guide right now for so many people to be accessing it and playing it. So every so often, I think something like this is totally okay, just not all the time. I know a lot of people were talking about how they would like to see a style where we have no changes for like 3 months unless it's game breaking. And then again, like big changes, and then no changes, and then big changes. Because I think a lot of people are happy that they can feel secured with their league start. But at the same time, for me, Path of Exile is a lot more than just a league start. Yeah. It's like a whole game. I can play my league starter, do almost all content on that character, take a break, come back to the game in a few days, do an SSF restart, do a private league. There's just so much that happens within PoE that I think a lot of people are too bored or burnt out or just don't want to experience, which is okay, right? But there's more to PoE than just a league starter.
Absolutely. It's also depending on if you're playing hardcore, softcore, trade. It's all self-found. Like in trade, for example, the league start is, at least for the, I don't have a better way to put it, but for the 1% player base that really pushes the super high end in trade leagues, league start basically creates your foundation for the next 2 weeks. If you perform well in your first 5 days in the league start, you set up a couple of 100 exalteds and all of those preparations that you can do in those days. If you achieve that, the next coming 2 weeks, you're already crafting and being the first on the market to create a supply for the medium budget people. And if you achieve that, it's very easy to just snowball the rest of the league. Normally that goes well for me, but not this time.
I've never done that. I don't know. I always get so impatient. I want to I do, but I have this problem where when I start streaming PoE, I want to just go. I want to just go. And it definitely doesn't help that I play RF, so the only thing I need to do is press my shield charge button, but I want to just go. And then what happens to me is the same thing that happens to a lot of like newer players or even like average tier PoE players, right? I fall into the same category where I farm up a bunch of wealth, and then I'm like, okay, it's time to craft an RF helmet. And then I craft, and I'm like, okay, this looks kind of usable. And then it's like, oh, you should, you know, prefixes cannot be changed, veiled chaos, or don't forget about async slam. Have you tried imprinting? Wait, it's not magic. Don't forget you can do, you know, prefix to suffix or suffix to prefix. And then it's like, did I mention that you can do this, this? And it's like, oh my God, where to start? I don't want to just delete my currency, but at the same time, losing currency is part of learning. That's part of how Path of Exile is, right? Because everything is essentially gambling to an extent, right? It's very hard to force the odds unless you're doing something very specific, right? So just spending currency is also part of just playing the game. And I get very annoyed when I try to go to like Craft of Exile and I try to navigate through the UI. It's just too much for me, right? I don't know. I try it, and sometimes I can do it with like the basic stuff, but sometimes it's just so complex to try to even just get started with PoE. And that's pretty much about it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I always tell people that you can have these Craft of Exile, the Krang Landinator links, currently only available to verified users, I think, through him, the whitelists, Nebu that makes the website. But what they do is you can go through the Krang Landinator and check what the average craft cost would be for whatever base you put in, which requires a lot of knowledge about crafting in general. But a lot of people seem to be in the boat where they think that, well, let's take a Minion Helmet or RF Helmet, whatever kind of item you want to craft, and the item is going to tell you it's going to cost you this much averagely to craft, and that's simulated over thousands and thousands upon thousands of finished products. That doesn't mean, and that's the average craft cost. Well, it means that the average craft cost you're expected to spend. But I mean, you can get lucky and hit it on the first try. You can also be unlucky. So when it comes to profit crafting, which is something I dive into quite a lot, I try to find a market that has like the average craft cost, and then I add 30% on top of that, and I compare that number to the worst sellable outcomes. As long as the margins there are okay or good for me, like twice the amount or 3 times, even more sometimes, then that's a profitable market as long as that market is active. And that's when I really craft. I don't really craft items for myself unless there is nothing on the market that I can purchase. I have to craft it, which is self-fund. You have to, right? Because if I'm only looking to do one item, I don't care what the average craft cost is, because I can get lucky or unlucky, and that means that's still going to be a risk and a gamble of my currency. Then I'd rather just buy it. But if I'm looking to make currency out of craft, I'm looking at those active markets, and I don't craft one, I craft hundreds of that item. Like lastly, I made the Minion Helmets. In the first week, I sold over 200 helmets in the first 9 days, I think it was. And those helmets, some of them I got lucky on. I actually got unlucky in quite a few of them and lost currency on 2 of them. But since I'm crafting that many, the average craft cost was about the average craft cost that was expected, and each worst sellable outcome was profitable, and each good outcome sold for even more, each great outcome sold for even more than that. So profit crafting has a lot more to do with some people think that you craft a big item for a little bit of currency and sell it for hundreds of exaltas, but that's not true. Profit crafting is crafting the smaller shit that sells, that makes you double or triple your investment for each sale, so to say, averagely, which still can involve you losing. So when it comes to like upgrading your character, it's a bit different, but that's also easier when it comes to meta builds such as the Righteous Fire that you've been making, or the Mace Skeletons that I've been pushing as well. In this league, a lot of people are playing them, which means that the supply of these items in trade environment is available, which also means that they're flooding the market, which drops down the market prices, so that it becomes a buyer's market, essentially, so that the new and newer players will have an easier, affordable options, essentially, instead of crafting this. They don't have to gamble their currency on it. But like, you can compare this to other builds like, I love playing Dark Pact. I don't get why it's not nerfed. It's so insane. But the playstyle is not the best according to most people. But there's very few items on the market that is strictly for Dark Pact that is available. So those things you kind of have to craft if you want to get, really big with it. You have to gamble your currency. You can get lucky, you can get unlucky, right? But crafting in general is always a gamble. There are very, very few things in this game that is deterministic. Like, you can slam a Hunter Exalted on a shield, and if you block the suffixes, that's gonna give you percent life, right?
Percent life, right?
Yeah, and
that's very small exceptions to it for sure. Those are okay, like those I get, right? Those even same thing with a weapon. If you have like a perfect RF multi-modded weapon and you're gonna Hunter slam for a suffix, you have like 5 things that can pop up, one of them being insane, which is like malevolence effect. Sometimes you slam like overwhelm, physical damage reduction, but I like that. I like that when you have your item at like the super high-end stage and you're like, okay, it's not easy to perfect this, but I've limited my mod pool down from 2,742 to 5. Like that feels much better at least, right?
Yeah. Yeah, same with the minion one with the cemetery effect. If you do it properly, you'll have 2 suffixes open. You block a power damage per power charge, and there's a tier 1 and tier 2. So it's 2 out of 11, which is what? That's 18 something % chance of hitting tier 1 or tier 2, 9% to hit tier 1, which is a pretty good odds. But again, that's still odds. That's still gambling. But
But I was gonna say it's not bricked. Even if you slam it, it's usable, right? Or you're sellable, which is nice.
Yeah, that's for sure, for sure. It's a bit different when it comes to like, I think that's the only time where stuff, well, most of the times where that's not the case is when we're talking like mirror tier items. Like if I do an augment influence on the mirror helmet for minions, I mean, if you don't hit the minion damage, you're gonna start over with the prefixes. I mean, suffix can't be changed and null and pray you don't brick it and then go again. Like it's pretty messy, but I think that for the most part it's kind of fine. Path of Exodus has very often, it has this approach to crafting where there are very few exceptions to actually deterministic crafting, and it always comes down to increasing your odds of hitting something specific. Or with fossils like the minion +2 ones, it's not about increasing your odds of hitting it. It's actually designed to block everything except what you need. So you just need to hit 3 prefixes. If that happens, you're gonna have a +2. That's just how it works because you blocked everything else. There are 4 prefix mods and 2 of them shares the mod pool. So if you hit 3 prefixes on those fossils, you're gonna have a +2. Which is like 1 in 12. But again, it's all about increasing your odds, right? It has nothing to do with you're gonna guarantee get this mod or that mod. You're just literally making sure that you're getting as the best odds possible. And that's just Path of Exile crafting in a nutshell. I mean, compare that to like MMO games, like take World of Warcraft, for example. You do a craft, well, you're going to get that craft in the store. You paid for it, that's what you get. There's no RNG, but that's a different game. And when it comes back to ARPG games, we can look at things like Last Epoch. Have you played Last Epoch a lot, by the way?
I did, yeah. I actually was the first person to introduce Last Epoch, like, to Twitch. They contacted me. I invited them over to my apartment. We ate chocolate, talked about Last Epoch. And yeah, I've been following the progress of it. I haven't played it too much recently because it still feels like the optimization is not quite there, but I really like what they're doing with the game.
Yeah. I love it. Like, I remember when they were on Kickstarter, I didn't actually know about that story from your side, but I know we were very few of the streamers that was like, we gotta try this out. We gotta try it and promote it and see what other people think of it. And they come a long way. Actually, one of my scenes I'm using in my stream is made by the devs from Last Epoch, actually, so that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah. But they
I like their crafting.
Oh yeah, it's still a bit of RNG in there, but it feels less bad.
It's because I'm telling you. So as a guy I speak for the people because I'm very impatient. It's nice because you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you get in. So let's take like a little step extra, and I could be wrong with Last Epoch's like the way they do stuff now, but you're looking for your purple affix on a good base, right? You get your purple affix on a good base. So you're like, okay, cool. I got my T6 mod on my tier 1 perfect shield. And you're like, all right, how do I do this? And you know, there's 2 prefix and 2 suffix. You put the shield in the crafting menu. Voila. You can see all of your prefixes. You can see all of your suffixes. You then are choosing what you want to do, and it shows you the percentage chance. So even if you don't get it, you might get annoyed, but you're learning from the experience because you see what's happening in front of you. A lot of the time with PoE, and I'm not saying they need to change this, it can be frustrating because there's just so much, right? Yeah. Like you're all spamming, you're chaos spamming, you're harvest reforging, and you're just like, I always see these things pop up, but it's always the wrong thing. Right? So like maybe you got T7 life with T4 life regen with tier 8 physical damage reduction. Well, maybe a new player didn't know that you could craft something on that and then put it in like harvest reforge more likely, and then it gets a good outcome, and then you take it to bestiary and suffix to prefix, and then your prefixes cannot be changed, and then you scour, and then you work on your suffixes with Eldritch Chaos and etc. And that's good though, right? That's really good because it does open up a niche market for people who want to make a shit ton of money, min-max their builds, and then people who make a ton of money who want to buy them. It's just I feel there's this really difficult entry barrier for PoE. And I think what they do is they're always on the right time, or they're on the right track with league mechanics. Like, I think recombinators are really good for newer players and experienced players just because of that, right? It's a lot more deterministic.
I think that like I said, the entry level is very tricky, if you will. But then again, like we've played the game for many years, and we have a fundamental baseline understanding. And I know Chris Wilson said last time he was on Bayclass, he said that most, not all, but most, according to his statistics, which we don't know, but I mean, I'll take Chris' words for it, obviously. He said that most people that are playing the game, they are not entirely new players, they are returning players. And that got me thinking, because a lot of us players, we've played before and we have been introduced to crafting. Like, I was doing crafts in Standard League 7-8 years ago, and the crafts we had access to was alterations, augments, transmutations, exalted chaos, and we actually had eternal orbs back then. But that was it. And I remember spending 400x on a staff for SRS only to finish it literally hours before the server went down to patch for the Forsaken Masters, which made the staff I crafted 400x cost about 6x to make. So yeah, that was a fun story. Luckily, I started playing leagues back then after that. But they introduced a new way for us to craft with the bench crafts, because that was introduced with the Forsaken Masters. And suddenly a whole new world of crafting opened up, and everyone who was playing the game before that, they already had a full understanding of the very baseline bubblegum currencies, we call it these days. Back then, that was the currency. There was no bubblegum going on around here. That was the currency. You crafted with that shit. And nowadays, that currency is like, you know what, you can use it in some situations, but mostly it's just going to be traded away or flipped or used for base items and stuff like that. So it's come a long way, but it's like we got that understanding and that knowledge, and then we were introduced to benchcraft, and then we went through the entire game of the league, whatever. We're going through all of what the masters meant, but taking the masters aside, we learned the benchcraft. And I remember there were some people that found out how to make the bows and the +3 staffs very easily, and they banked so much currency because they understood the crafting before everyone else. And then when that became public knowledge, suddenly it was like, yo, this is how you do it. This is crazy. Now we got that information with the meta crafts. And then, you know, later we got the next set of the new crafting method in Path of Exile, and the people who have played, they have already gotten from the basic understanding of the base currency into understanding exactly how the bench crafts works. And now we're getting another method, and it just felt really good because we had the information, we were presented something new, and all we did was learn the new, and then how does this work with these things? So it was a very smooth progression as we went from playing back then all the way to where we are now. Every time they introduce something new, like the recombinators in this league, it was kind of smooth to learn because, you know, we have all the information from before. But a new player comes into the game and they're like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't use that.
I have so many new people coming to me because I get them all the time saying it's my first time playing PoE. I'm following your guide. And I actually, on my website I made for Righteous Fire, have a very simplified crafting section which shows every single piece of gear, and 95% of it is explaining how to craft it with essences or harvest. But it's very entry level gear, right? Like, we're talking about getting like 2 usable affixes out of the 6. And I've had a lot of people give me very positive feedback about crafting their gear, and I'm happy with that. It's just, it's hard, like you said, to get new players to understand where to start, right?
Yeah.
And I try to get them to start in essence or harvest because you don't spend any currency for that, right? Especially because RF is good for harvest, because you press Infernal Cry and the whole entire harvest plot explodes, including the Katava Heralds, and then you just click your crafts, right?
No.
You're not spending anything. So
I like that as well. Since I'm a person who pushes a lot of profit crafting as a main source of income, so to say, in trade leagues, a lot of people ask me how, well, what to craft, but I can't answer that. But they ask where to start learning to craft, and what I usually tell people is that most guides, because of the YouTube algorithm and the way it works for us content creators, it is not worth our time to make a video to explain how alteration, the blue currency works, and it's not worth our time to explain how essence work, because there's going to be a couple thousand people that might watch the video, not even guaranteed, might watch the video. Everyone else already knows that is watching the content, and all the time and work invested into that is just going to be completely wasted. And that's really sad, because that type of information is something that the community could have, well, specifically new players have a lot of use of. So normally what I tell people is to basically go through a ton of different crafting guides, because the crafting guides that is available on YouTube, and some in written form, like I have a bunch of written guides as well, what they do is that they don't tell you how to use this or that. It will tell you how to craft a specific item. Like, for example, the RF helmet. Like, you craft the RF helmet is crafted this way, or the Minion helmet is, you woke that, and then you use fossils. And if this happens, you can do that. And if this happens, well, you're done. Or you can slam, or you can bench craft, and you're done. And that will explain those processes. What I tell people to do is look at all of these crafting guides, and base crafting guides. There's a couple up as well, and then take a step back and look at the crafting guide that they've just learned how to craft a specific item. But by taking a step back and looking at, why is this person telling me to use those fossils? Why am I being told to use that essence? And look at it objectively from one step back, and to try to grasp why these things are used. And if you do that with several different guides, several items, you'll get the knowledge for what you can do with those crafting methods. So once you understand one item or a couple of items, then that knowledge can be applied on so many other items as well. And also learning to use Craft of Exile allows you to try these things out without using your actual in-game currencies. You can practice crafting through Craft of Exile as well, by just learning the emulator and stuff like that, which I think is a really good way to approach the learning process of it. But then again, people need to remember that the majority of the player base in pretty much any game is the casual players. And the casual players, well, I would arguably say, don't have the numbers on this, so take it with a grain of salt, but the majority of those, I'd assume, they are players that plays a couple of hours here and there, maybe more, maybe less, but they have no interest in coming home from work, getting work done, putting their kids to bed, feed their partner, and then get at the computer to not play the game, but do research for weeks.
Yeah.
They want to put the game up and kill monsters. Now, obviously, I'll tell those people that, Diablo 3 is around the corner, that you can do that there. Right. But, jokes aside, I think Diablo 3 caters to that type of player. But a lot of people are woven into PoE. And the problem is that if they want to get better at these things, if they want to learn, that is what they have to do. That's how Path of Exile is. Do you think that that's a healthy approach? I mean, Path of Exile hasn't grown a lot, so maybe it is. But what's your personal opinion?
I mean, so it's hard to say, right? Because I think that this question is hard to answer. So basically, you're saying that a new player wants to get into crafting or even engage in like the highest of content, and they have to research, whether they're researching to get the crafts to get that gear, because you can't just fight uber content in transmuted gear, right? Like, you have to actually farm. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that the way the game is right now is okay. There are definitely things I think that are way too misleading, though. Like, someone in chat brought this up. So, like, some things I think should be more like streamlined, like metacrafting. I think GGG should have something somewhere explained what metacrafting is. Like, even if you just click your crafting bench and there's a giant icon and you can just hover over it, and it just gives you a 2-sentence explanation of metacrafting, right? So, for example, if you do suffixes cannot be changed and you use an essence, it's going to destroy your entire piece of gear, right? Something like that. That stuff I don't even remember, because I don't do the 2 Exalt metacrafting mods all the time, because even to me, 2 Exalt is a lot of currency to spend. It's not something I want to just gamble away, even though it's a big part of crafting, right? Mm-hmm. Another example would be Righteous Fire as like a spell tag. Doesn't scale with spell damage, right? I think that there's still a lot of polishing that PoE can do, but I think the general idea of where the game is going is actually okay. And going back to the topic of crafting, I do think that there are a lot of entry-level crafts for people who even have 2 hours a day. The problem is finding the information that is accurate, up to date, and applies to their build so that they can use it. Like I have done with Righteous Fire, but not everyone has time to do this for every build, every league that's updated every 3 months, right?
Yeah.
There's just so much. And I think the biggest problem is just trying to find the accurate information, because like you said, a lot of content creators are deterred from making this content because it's outdated in 3 months. Maybe it's not the best way and you don't want to provide inaccurate information. There's just a lot of reasons.
You know, I've actually hired, because the stream has been going so well, I've actually hired a guy called Shrooms that is helping me update my written guides to make sure that my guides are updated every 3 months, because I can't keep up. It's impossible.
Right.
Now, then again, I do have, to my knowledge, the biggest guide hub that has ever existed in PoE, but that's made possible by me spending money to hire someone to help me maintain them and update them every league. And even then, it's a fuckload of hours that I'm spending every day on those things. Obviously a lot less now that I've hired him, thank God. Jesus, he's a blessing. But most content creators don't have this possibility. Most content creators don't even pay their moderators, as an example, because they're not in a situation where they can. Or, you know, it all depends on how they run their show. I mean, I know another friend streamer, I don't want to throw names under the bus, but he's doing everything himself. He barely has any moderators that does anything, because he does everything himself. And that's another way of streaming, right? And everyone does these things differently, and they're in different situations. And it depends on how you do it. Like the way I run things, I need moderators to do very specific things quite a lot, and therefore I have to go through those steps and do those things and make sure that they're happy doing it as well, because I can't do it without them, right? So that's another way of doing it. So it's all comes down to that, and that's just the business perspective or point of view when it comes to this topic. And then we're going to translate from that perspective into applying that to how can content creators create these type of very useful content for the community. And even if they are in a position where they can, it's not enough people that would want to consume that type of content to make the time you put into making it to begin with even worth the time. And it's just really sad. And it's really sad in my opinion, because that type of content should be solved by GGG themselves. Like you mentioned, have like an I button, like a little information, hover over it. Okay, meta crafting, you can learn by clicking this, like the tutorials that they have ish.
Yep. So actually, this is a great way to segue into something Chris Wilson said that I actually disagree with. Not to hate on Chris, you know, bless his RNG. He was talking about a glossary the other day on, I forgot exactly what it was, right? And he was saying that we know majority of our demographic does not read. I agree. I don't read. I try. I really do. I'll read the sentence, but I'll just miss every word in the sentence. I don't know how it happens, but it happens. But here's the thing I was explaining, right? Let's use an example.
Yep.
I don't know anything about Arc Nemesis. I really don't. I know 2 things with Arc Nemesis. 3 things. I know that Flame Sentinel is tanky for RF builds. I know that. I know that Steel Infused kills me through 90k armor, Aegis Aurora, 90 all res. I still die to Steel Infused occasionally, so that has Overwhelm. And I know that Overcharged makes them tanky, but I don't know why or how, and I've never really looked it up. And someone drops a Frost Wall, which makes me run a Phasing Flask. Normally, I never have to run Phasing Flask except for Invulnerability Shrines. As a guy who leveled 4 characters to 100 last league, I didn't learn any of this because I didn't do Arc Nemesis. This is the only thing I've learned getting to 100 and 99 this league. However, if GGG made it so when you died, right, it would say the name of the target that killed you, which I'm sure they can do, right, really easily. Like, you were killed by Steel-Infused Colossal Bone Stalker. I don't need a damage type. Just tell me that, right? At some point in time with a build, you will die to the same thing several times. How many people in PoE have a 3k life build because they don't want to invest more into defenses because they're going to get one shot anyway, zoom through their maps, occasionally get one shot, don't know what it is, but it happens frequently. Well, my friend, it would say it in the chat. You could maybe click it and it would take you right to the glossary of just that monster type. And we're only talking about Arch Nemesis. We're not talking about a full-blown Wikipedia for the whole game. We're just talking about an Arch Nemesis glossary that should not be that difficult to update, because whenever they make rare monster changes, the guy just opens up the glossary and edits whatever is in there. And all it has to do is just show the mod name in that exact color, give a tiny little description of what the mod does, and that's it, right? And I think that would be a good start into people reading, because they're clicking it out of frustration because they're dying, not because it popped up in their face. If something pops up in your face, you click X. When I get a new bestiary recipe, I want to Alt F4 because it's just like logging in the corner of my screen, right? But if I die to it and click it out of frustration, that's very different, because it's different.
Yeah. No, I think that in general the topic is interesting, and I definitely agree with it. It's just that this is at Siri, by the way. At Siri, the descendant of Bob the Dreadful Devourer Jr. the Fourth. It's in her insurance papers. That's how you stress around the background. I know Chris Wilson was talking about this specific topic in another podcast, and I don't remember if it was on this stream or if it was on Bakeclast during the, I think it was 315, let's call it fiasco. They got a lot of flashbacks during that league. And basically, we talked about this on death because in the China realm, it will tell you what source of damage killed you when you're dead. And people wanted that, but what you were talking about, I think, is even better. But the reason he stated that they didn't want to do this was because, well, what happens if you engage into a big fight with a lot of monsters and you die to chaos damage? But in reality, what hit you for the most was the fire damage. But you died because you stood on a desecrated ground. And the last couple of ticks was chaos damage. The game will not tell you died to chaos damage, but in reality, it was fire that killed you. And I was like, that's fine. Yeah, okay, it won't always be accurate because you took the last damage from that. But honestly, like, giving us some sort of indication, because if you play trade, especially newer players, and they die over and over and over again, it's gonna start being pretty clear what you're dying to. I mean, you know, you're not always gonna be on a desecrated ground when you're taking a big fire hit because you're not capped in fire resistance, for the player to realize that, well, I'm dying most of the fire damage. How do I fix this? Oh, I have minus 500 fire rest. Maybe that's a problem. You know, it allows people to look into fixing these things and changing them and adjusting their playstyle. And that's just the source of damage. And what you were talking about is the glossary, which I think is a great addition and idea to have in the game, where you can look into the mods. Because I'll be honest with you, when it comes to the Arch Nemesis, I'm in your boat. The problem is
you don't even know it. We play the game for a living, and we don't even know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, even during Arch Nemesis League, I didn't bother because I played Mage Skeletons. It's like, okay, I can die to some things, but that's like the Siphoner I noticed because my mana goes away. And I noticed the ice person, that's the circle ice walls that you're talking about. And the reason I know is because I'm playing Mage Skeletons. When low buddied, I don't rush in. So I'm actually hovering over the enemies when I'm summoning some skeletons. So I see the mods. I'm like, okay, that's ice person. I know what's gonna happen. But, you know, Steel Infused, I had no idea they did Overwhelm. I'll be honest with you. I
died to it, that's how I knew.
Yeah, and the Chaos Weavers, the green balls.
Oh, those green balls are absolute awful. They're so... I ran my first map in SSF yesterday. I was on a beach. I opened a strongbox. I went to read chat, and there was like 11 of these green balls following me. I'm like, how is this even allowed?
But they didn't nerf them, though. But Magma Barrier... Magma Barrier, the small balls, they were not visibly clear in the start. Yeah.
Let me tell you about Magma Barrier. So yesterday, or the day before, I did an SSF playthrough, right? So I just restarted. And I'm in Foothills, right? You know all about Foothills.
Yeah.
I was inside a fortification, so guarded, right? There's two doors on like the opposite sides. And there is a Magma Barrier mob off screen. His summons create, go down the hill, circle all the way around the fortification, enter the fortification, and then explode right where I am trying to like click the bargain or whatever.
Oh,
And I
no.
didn't know where they were coming from. I stopped and I just started looking around, and we just saw these red balls just appearing off screen and are just heat seeking their way all the way around the entire barrier, like the whole fortification, and just popping. And I'm like, what is doing that? And I learned it was magma barrier. I had no clue about it until that moment. That is what magma barrier does.
Oh, it's awful, dude. And the worst thing was they were so hard to see as well, and no distinct sound. So I wrote to Chris Wilson when I died to it a few times. I was like, bro, I can't see anything. Like I told Chris Wilson that I understand, Chris, that in Path of Exile, the idea of good build is where you don't see anything. Like the less you see on the screen, the better your build is. And I am playing Mage Skeletons. I can't see. I am blind. I'm literally blind when I'm playing, so the build's good, okay?
Articles.
Yes, I told him my build's good, but I can't see anything. So like, if I can't see the magma barriers flying to me, I can't dodge it. I will just die. And I mean, I play this game a lot, Chris. How do you think new players are experiencing this? And he's like, I'll talk to the team. And then they did make changes to it, thank God for that. But it's still bad. Because, I mean,
yeah,
the toxic ones, they fly like, they're visibly above ground effects. The magma barrier was like the elevation.
Ground effect that moves.
Yeah, like They were like just above the ground.
It's like a tumbleweed. It's like a tumbleweed rolling in sand. And you're just like, I don't see it. Yeah.
Oh man, it was terrible, but they fixed it. It's better now. I'm not really happy with it, but I'm happy that it's better than before. But like when it comes to Arch Nemesis mods, it's somebody in chat Rasputin said Gargantuan equals big. Yeah. I still don't know what Gargantuan does. All I know is they do more damage and they have more HP, but most notably, they're bigger. Like that's
it. They're much bigger.
Yeah, I mean that's all you know, but that's because I can't be able to read up on it. But then again, I'm also playing a meta build, and it's not Righteous Fire, it's Meixsell, and I'm playing, and it's like, yeah, okay. You know, if I died to it, maybe if I got annoyed enough, I would look into it. Like you said, I mean, you died to the Steel Infused and you started figuring out that, okay, well, they have Overwhelm, right? Or you can look it up. But unless you are able to pinpoint the exact type of monster you are consistently dying to, new players won't even bother reading up. And even if they do, they might not even read up because people don't want to read, like Chris was saying, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. It just feels kind of awkward in general when it comes to this approach. And there's a bunch of other things that people need to realize with in-depth mechanics, like Soul Eater, for example. I know from a minion perspective, newer players, they don't have super high-end gear, they don't have the super damage. So when they encounter packs of enemies, it might take them a few seconds before the pack is dead. It doesn't die in the first hit. And then, you know, they resummon their skeletons because the skeletons might die, or they're playing SRS or something like that, and the minions are dying. Suddenly there's a Soul Eater that was just in the room next collecting some souls there for your minions. You go in there and you got Speedy Gonzalez going crazy on your ass, you know? Just Jesus. And they don't even understand why. Or the fact that how souls work in the game. You know, the closest target to the minion or enemy dying is the closest target that can collect the soul gets the soul kind of approach. Like same thing with Unending Hunger for Spectres. If you have 5 Spectres with Soul Eater running, only the closest Spectre to the target dying gets the soul, unless you are closer to the target and you have a non-filled Vol skill, then you get the soul instead and not your Spectre. And most people don't know that either. And that's just awkward. But Soul Eater monsters, they ignore this. A monster or minion dies, that's given a soul to all of them for some reason, which should be the case, but it's very rare that you encounter 2 Soul Eaters at the same time. But it's just
there's a lot of I think there's no harm considering that they were able to basically release this league with virtually no changes, right? I mean, there was still changes, but very light compared to what they did before. I think that they could step up their quality of life department, and I do think, regardless of what people post, starting with a glossary with at least highlighting just Arch Nemesis mods, because it is something everyone has to face now. They're in your maps, they're in Labyrinth, they're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I think that this is at least a good start. At least, but not, the thing is, they cannot just like make it like the tutorial where it pops up at the beginning. Like, it has to be integrated in a smart way that will get people to click it. Because, and that's why I was suggesting it tying with dying, because that's a big part of PoE is people die, right? Like people die a lot. And even if they can't distinguish the damage type that killed them because they don't have that ability yet, they could at least start somewhere that's not half-assed, right? That's all.
No, I completely agree with that as well. It's generally providing knowledge that should be easily accessible and not be a again, with a lack of better word of putting it, a burden on the content creator's shoulders, because it feels like a lot of what's the knowledge and that is available to the community is literally carried in a backpack by the content creators. We are the ones supplying this information, and a lot of that information is so fundamental and so baseline information that it should, without doubt, in any type of new game in the current fucking era, should be in the game. I mean, hell, there's even instructions on how to play Minesweeper. I mean, you can go to Minesweeper, there's like 2 pages of information of how it works, what you can do. You don't have even that for the basic stuffs in PoE. Come on. And at the same time, we talked about crafting a lot as well. We talked about crafting and how advanced it can be for new players to learn and all those approaches. But at the same time, it's smooth, as we talked about, for people that play the game for a long time, as we get this information a little bit here, a little bit there, and we adapt with that new methods into what we already know. But it's new players goes in and be like, yo, what the hell's happening? The problem with that, in my opinion, is that they don't stop. They're just adding more and more crafting methods. And it's just crazy. I had talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the chat, and the majority of that chat, obviously, this is a very small sample pool of people, obviously, so it's not really accurate for the community in PoE. But we talked about the idea that, like, how many people are using essences, and most people were like, well, I used them in the start as an alcorb, and that's it. Unless a guide that tells me to craft it is telling me to use it for something. Other than that, I'll just sell it. And then they're just adding more and more of these crafting methods. I don't think that many people are using fossils, maybe a bit more nowadays. But again, most people don't actually dive into these different crafting methods because it's too much to learn. And then they're adding the recombilators this league. And the recombilators works very differently, right? But they have different perspectives, so there are different solutions that they're bringing to the game. Like we always talk about how the item bloat is happening, where you don't look at items that drops because it's trash, right? Whereas the recombinators are now making even magic items and rare items at least worth looking at, because if they have that one or two mods, you know, I'm playing a melee build, there's a T1 physical percent on that weapon, and that's a siege axe, and that other axe I found there is a shit axe, but that one has tier 1 flats. You know, if I recom these, woo.
Yeah, I like recombinators a lot. I haven't used them a lot because they've frustrated me, but I like the idea because it brings value back to items. Yeah. Going back to the topic of, well, not the topic, but kind of like when, before they introduced like the newer influences, what is it? I call them Squidward and Exarch. Before they introduced, before they introduced that, there was no reason to pick up most bases outside of just harvest crafting it or whatever, right? Like it just didn't have any value. Now I do feel like there's value. I feel a lot more impact if I find like something that's not influenced but still has good stats. You could Eldritch influence it, and now your movement speed boots, even though they're not two-tone, just got another like 8% movement speed. So that's like 30 plus 8, that's like 38%. There's just a lot of really cool things you can do, and you don't have to be that expensive. You could be an SSF and just throw literally one of each on each piece of gear, and you might even get like a positive outcome, right? Or you could even farm them just a little bit more. And I really like that idea because it brings back the idea of using gear you identify off the floor and modify it slightly. And then with recombinators, that takes it another step, right? Example, when I first started playing PoE, right? Back in hardcore, I would be #1 on the leaderboard for like 2 hours. Every time there was a fresh ladder. And the reason why is because I would get to Merciless, Chamber of Sins, and as I'm running through the campaign, I would pick up every single blue scepter, and I would ID it to get +2 fire gems. And the minute I got +2, you throw Fire Trap, you throw your Prolif, and whatever else in there, and you are steamrolling content. And then that just fell off the radar. That wasn't a thing anymore, right? Like, why do that when you could just get all this different gear? And I really enjoy kind of going slightly back to the roots of like, okay, well, what if I pick up a blue scepter idea and I get +1 all spell skills? It can happen. It's not common, but it can happen, right? I mean, I've used 400 caster reforges and haven't seen +1, so why not pick up blue scepters and ID them? So I really enjoy that recombinators are, they are somewhat a lot more beginner friendly than other methods, because a new player can like look at 2 pieces of gear, recombinate them together. Sometimes they get an outcome that works, sometimes they don't, but it's a lot more obvious, I would say, than other forms of crafting. On the low end, of course.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. And the like items dropped on the ground, I mean, it's like most items we drop are not even seen by our filters. Thank God for filters, by the way. Remember the days when we didn't have that shit.
Yeah.
That was not fun. But there's pros and cons of the recombinators, in my opinion. Like, obviously, I think they're great for solo self-found. But then again, I also firmly believe that the game needs to be balanced, and this might not ring well for some people, but I believe firmly that the game should be balanced around softcore trade. And the reason for that is because that's where the majority of the player base is. It makes sense for them to make sure that that is optimized. And then if you play something else, that's on you. But that's where the majority of the player base is. Cater to that. And that's more for the casual players. And I think the recombinators are great for casual and newer players because it makes sense. It'll tell you what to do. And you get a very easy understanding of how it works. And most new players don't run strict filters and stuff like that. They will pick up their items and they'll be like, oh, well, I need this or I need that for this build. I understand that from the guide I was following. Okay, but I can combine these items. It's very natural flow of progression and understanding and learning the recoms for newer players. Obviously, there's a lot to it if you want to be picky, with the amount of mods, the prefixes, the amount of mods and the suffixes, the odds chance of happening, the Sentinel modifier, you can spawn rings, you can get plus max power charge, fancy charge, endurance charge, yada yada yada.
That's all fluff stuff for newer players. So
yeah, exactly. So those things don't really matter to new players. What they need to understand is you can combine these. I have one mod I want there and another one mod I want there. I know that there is a chance for me to combine this into one item that has both of those. And that's all the information that is needed for a newer casual players to actually make use of them, right? And
yep.
The only problem I see when we talk on the other side of the coin, the negative impacts of recombinators, if we say that they go core, for example, is obviously that we have the abusive behavior of the 1% player base in the trade environment. If they are too rare, they will be gate kept away from casual players to make it to the point where they will not be worth using for new players because only the meta bubble that is created in different crafting methods is created. For example, certain fossils will be priced based of what the best way to craft or best item to craft with that specific fossil is. Like bound fossils goes to the Minion Helmets, so therefore the bound fossil is completely priced based of that specific bubble of crafting, even though you can use those fossils for other crafts as well. And the recoms will be the same approach if they make them too rare. But right now they are so commonly dropped that they can be used without people feeling bad about using them. New players can drop them and they don't have to feel bad about using them, or use them and then find out a couple of days later that recom you just used, that wasn't exalted, bro. You just wasted an X, right? That's not what happened. Yeah. Like, it's a couple of chaos. They can use them and not feel bad about it, and that's really good for them to experience. Like you talked about before with the more you craft in Last Epoch, for example, you know what's happening and you're learning the process as you're doing it, and the recoms has that approach to it. So the bad side, to finalize my thoughts here, the negative impact of recoms is more about how in the trade league environment exclusively, how they can be abused in the meta bubbles that exists or get spawned by this, because now we've tried them out, we know what to use them for, like the meta minion one with the cemetery effect, which you get double damage prefix. It's one of those methods. And if they make the recoms too rare, or if they change that to make them rarer, that's going to have an impact on these things, and that's going to take them away from the casual players. And I firmly believe that GhazzyTV should focus a lot more on the new and newer players when it comes to knowledge, experience, and just general quality of life as a whole. Because we, the high-end players, we have gotten aspirational content. We got uber bosses, okay? And not all of us have been, not all of the top players have defeated all of them even. Like, they're hard, or should be hard, right? And I think that's really good. but it's time to focus on the newer players, and I really hope the recoms goes core with a really good drop rate. But what's your take on recoms going core, personally?
I think there's zero chance that it happens based off of my personal thoughts on what they've done with like Harvest, but I haven't really done enough recombinating, to be fair, to like give a crazy opinion. I've just done some very basic, like combining 2 fracture items to get like double fractured base, and then essence crafting, right? So like for me, I really like them for that. What if they divide them by like, what if they split them into 3 tiers and they make it so there's a recombinator that drops in white maps in the campaign, one that drops in yellow maps, and one that drops in red tier maps, and then they could tie that to the item level of gear. So that way, unless people are exploiting item level 60 gear somehow, it should kind of be okay with the drop rate. Does that sort of make sense?
You think like similar to Harvest does with like the item level craft plus minus 10 levels?
Yes. Right, because a lot of mods are restricted by like item level 75 plus or like 83 to even like get that modifier. So if your say your recombinator only goes up to like 74, I don't know, 70, they would have to look exactly how they would divide it. Then white recombinators would be great for the newer player base because it's not going to have any value. It's going to be like 1 chaos or 2 chaos, and they could recombinate whatever they want. But then if they get a rare one, that would be more obvious, indicated by their filter, and based off of the fact that they read what the standard recombinator does, they know that this one is a higher tier, kind of like the Chaos Orb and the Exalted Orb, right?
And basically have the recom work for any item rather than having one for jewelries, one weapon, one armor.
Yeah, I really like the idea of entry-level crafting when you start mapping, like Essence and Harvest. But Essence and Harvest, without some understanding, Harvest specifically, a new player will be lost. Recombinators are much more straightforward. You literally mash 2 items together with a chance of getting both outcomes, right? Like everyone understands that when they click the recombinator and see what they're doing.
No, I like that idea. I like it. It's similar to, we talked about Harvest back when they were nerfing Harvest. Oh god, what a day. So we talked about different solutions. Yeah, well, like Harvest was in a situation where they decided that they wanted it core. They gave us full power, and then the league after were like, okay, we gotta nerf this guy. So like, this is not okay. And the problem with that, obviously, is that in the entire community, let's say that they are going to nerf it, and now we're going to look at how we're going to nerf it. And you ask 1,000 people, you will get a minimum of 500 different opinions on how they should have nerfed it to be balanced, right? There's just so many pools of groups of people where that has really good suggestions on how it should work, and no matter which solution they chose, it would not cater to the majority of the player base, and therefore not be good, right? Because the majority would still be angry at them. And I think that recoms might be in the same category there. But one of the suggestions with the Harvest stuff is very similar to what you were talking about with the recoms, because we talked about deterministic crafting and allowing people to have like a chance to getting an augment craft onto their bench craft, which is a chance. We talked about that being a chance to get such a craft on your bench by killing a boss. So if you kill a map boss, you would get that craft on your bench, but it would be limited not just the item level, but also to the highest tier that bench can apply. Like, say you get an augment physical for killing a beach map tier 1, or a tier 1 map boss. And you can do that, but that's not going to give you higher than a tier 4 roll or higher than a tier 3 or something like that. That would be a really cool way for people to get actually deterministic crafting. You know, there's a lot of these suggestions going around, similar to Harvest being like, well, you can just limit the max tier they can apply. That will make it less overpowered, but still not take away the deterministic crafting. And all of these suggestions are really good, in my opinion. But, you know, they can't do all of it, right? So they have to be that. And obviously they don't seem to want deterministic crafting.
My thought process on when the Harvest nerf was going off is basically, first off, divide your Harvest crafts into tiers, whether you have 5 tiers, whether you have 3 tiers, whatever, right? Like augment would clearly be on its own tier. It's very rare. Then allow us to itemize it, but put a fixed amount of currency on the itemization. They can easily manage this because it's tied to the tier. So since augment is in its own tier, you can make it so it costs 50C based on the exalt price of an average league. So just something very basic, right? They can mess with this whenever they want. That way it takes a guaranteed 50 chaos to itemize your augment, which you can then sell for a profit. It prevents the scamming. Well, I mean, people can still trade switch, but it prevents the scamming. It prevents the need for third-party like tools to be able to trade, and still allows people to craft. That way, like say you're a newer player and you notice that you found a bunch of res swaps and harvest, it eliminates the need of like, oh, I don't know what I want to do with my harvest because I just don't know what I want to do, but I know I'm going to need this resistance later. Let me just itemize it for 5C because it's a common craft, save it, and then I'll come back and use it when it's necessary, rather than I have to use it right now. I need all of my bases in this tab. This tab needs to be named this name. I just think that would help a lot more. But again, that's more deterministic crafting, and I don't think they want that. Commercials.
I like with these suggestions and what you're saying. The problem is, Chris, I know Kaka, one of the mods in the chat, said, Chris has already said that if they were to itemize it, they would need to nerf the drop rate. And the reason because of that was because it was very simple. They were in a position where there's a lot of crafts that are, one, either not being used, or two, not even being saved. Because of the simple fact that not everybody understands them, right? And if they were to itemize them, people would be like, well, I know this is good. They would then make them itemized, and therefore it would be more readily available to the community. And then, the follow-up question was about if they were fine with people trading through third-party tools such as TFT Discord, for example. And where he said that that essentially what he said is that he's fine with that. I'm not a big fan of that. I love the fact that we have TFT. I'm not a big fan of the fact that we need TFT, but I'm very happy that we have it. Not everyone likes using it. That's fine. But imagine trading harvest crafts without them. I mean, let's just put that into perspective, and you'll see why I think it's really good that we have them. Yeah. But they say they would have to make them rarer, and I mean, I barely got any. And he got goddamn augment crasses league. I've got augment non-influence, sure, but the real augments, I don't think I've got a single one this league so far. And I've been pushing harvest gambas, so I've been doing a lot of harvest. Like every map I've done, more or less, I've had harvest on it because I've been gambling. Well, my 20 House of Mirrors are gone, so I've done a lot of it, and still no augment crafts, which is crazy. I did get augment non-lucky, but not specific ones. So that's pretty crazy. But the problem with itemization is not just that he said that they make them rare. You have that other aspect. Since well, at least from my perspective, the idea is that they should cater to or balance the game around the softcore trade, because that's where the majority of player base is. The problem with itemization and nerfs and changes is obviously in a situation where a lot of the 1% player base have a tendency of being having an abusive behavior towards the market. And I can tell you this right now, that if they were to itemize it, I've said this before as well, if they itemized harvest crafts and there would be augment influences available to buy, I don't care if I'm using it, I would buy every single one I can afford. And then I would sell them later for a higher price, or I would use them. Like, that's what I would do. And I'm not even the person that does this kind of approach to the market, but I know certain groups, I know a lot of people that do this in the current market. Now imagine if we had Harvest doing this as well. It would be similar to what happened in Legion League, where in Legion League you have these emblems, right? And you needed 4 emblems to make a 4-way that opens up the possibility for a 5-way. And the problem with that was that, yeah, you could farm it, but the problem was newer players, they couldn't run the 4 or 5 ways effectively enough to get currency from rewards from that encounter to be worth more than what those emblems would be worth selling for. And that was because the only way you could achieve that was if you equipped a headhunter. Like, there was like 3 builds that could do it. Like, I didn't even play that, so I did it once, and I was like, I'm losing currency. I'll never run this again unless I do a headhunter build, and I'm not interested in that. I will just have to sell it. So that entire content was, well, I can choose to do it anyways, but I knew it was going to be a bad call. So it was gate kept away from me, and I was in a situation where I could make a build with that, but not everyone does. And then you have the large player base that can't even get a headhunter, and therefore never have the possibility to reliably and consistently do that level of content. and itemizing things like this would have that impact as well. Even though I love the idea of it, there are other aspects of it that is detrimental. But then again, you can always play solo self-fun, right? And the problem is solved, you know?
I gotta use the restroom real fast. It'll just be like 2 minutes.
All good, dude. All good. Thanks so much for the subs, guys. I saw there was ads playing. I apologize for that. I can't postpone it more. I can't turn it off actually because of the contract today. So I'm just gonna snooze the ads as long as I can. But thanks so much for the support, guys. For September the 3rd, dropping in 10 months. Appreciate that. Thanks so much. And we got a sequel for the Prime. Appreciate that as well. Thank you, guys. What does the chat think about the itemizing harvest and recoms that we talked about? What do you guys think of it so far? Okay, the trade window, and stuff like that, stacking currency orbs to a higher quantity and stuff like that. The problem with these things is that it's normally like a newer player don't trade thousands of chaos orbs. Like, I'm comfortable when I have between 10 and 20,000 chaos orbs in my stash because I don't have to flip a bunch of X to it. Most people don't have 20,000 chaos orbs. Most people don't even have exalteds enough to have 20,000 chaos orbs. So it's like these niche problems that are in a situation that is problematic for a very select few people. And I honestly, sure, I would love it, but I don't think that they should focus on, you know, providing quality of life features for that type of approach to the game, personally. I think they should cater to the more casual player base. Welcome back, sir.
Oh, no, it's okay. I liked what someone suggested about, what was it earlier? Someone was talking about a crafting interface where basically you could go to someone. So, like, say you start the conversation from TFT, you're looking for, like, an AUG Fizz, and you go to their hideout, and there's, like, a special interface on their crafting bench that you can both interact with, so the item is, like, always shown there. The problem is they're never going to spend extra resources towards something like that is probably going to get changed in the future anyway, because they don't like to waste stuff based off of what GG feedback has given me. Because I think Chris, based off of previous experiences, does not care if people get scammed as long as it's not malicious. But it just sucks when you are losing items you spend time on due to simple mistakes because someone read an item incorrectly. I'm sure you've experienced that, Ghazzy. And or just someone literally yoinks an item, right? It's really weird.
Yeah, I've had an experience this league about that.
Yep.
It was fun.
I did one mirror craft. Like, I made an item that was worth mirroring in Ritual League when we had, like, Harvest back, and I got so anxious every single time I would just, and it was not even worth value compared to yours, right? I spent like maybe like 120x on my helmet that ended up becoming mirror tier, but it was just so anxious every single time. I'm like, you know, before I see it, I need you to send me a screenshot of the craft you're going to use with your mouse selected on the craft, so I know you're not selecting another craft, then confirm for me, then click it, then give it back to me. And it's just, I don't know, that's just too tedious. Like that,
yeah.
It was fun for one league, and I just don't think that's too much, right? Like, I have nothing against TFT in any type of way. They are just doing what they can with resources that are not provided, but I just feel like we need something different.
Yeah. I know that, like, I know Chris can sometimes comes off as not caring about scammers, but it's like Kaka said in the chat as well, and I've talked to Chris about this. They actually do care. It's the problem is that it has to be proven that it's malicious, right? Then they care at that point, right? And the only way they can do that is to verify that a certain individual has been reported X amount of times. And if it's a frequent thing that is happening with a certain someone, they will get punished for it. But that's not going to give you your items back. You still got scammed, you know? But if it's happening consistently, they will be like consequences for it, which is good. I mean, it's the best they can do, I guess, in the current system. But I don't know, like I did what you did, but in a different approach. In the previous couple leagues, what I've done is that I demand collateral when I craft. The problem when you're doing these big crafts where, you know, if you lose a mediocre budget item or low budget item for crafting, it sucks, but, you know, it's not the end of the world. But when you spend a couple of mirrors on an item, and it's screwed over, and you have to, it's entirely screwed. That was weeks of not sleeping worth of time being wasted. What I was going to say was that the problem was that in the previous leagues I demanded collateral, and the problem with the bigger items is that eventually I'll reach the point where I can only buy crafts from people that have a mirror, that they can give me the mirror as collateral, because my item's worth more than that.
Awful.
Yeah, and then I'm sitting for several days before I can craft it. So eventually I said, I'm just going to stop doing this, because the average way to craft the Minion Helmet, which is my personal goal every league to make the meta Minion Helmet, it has an average of 1,100 reforged keep suffix to just play with the prefixes. That's one part of the craft method. I'm not going to sit for 1,100 trying to get people with collateral. It's a common craft, sure, but still. So I stopped doing that, and this was the first time somebody actually bricked that item. Back in Harvest, somebody bricked an reforged caster, and it took us 1,300 reforged caster to get the item back. It's such a mess, but Harvest Craft was more available then.
Oof. That's a big oof.
Yeah, but one of the suggestions that I really like that I think they should put resources to is, I know, like crafting, we always talk about different games that, they can take inspiration from, because essentially that's what game companies do. They take inspiration from other companies and other games that are successful and some that are not, like Path of Exile originated from the idea of Diablo, for example. And different ideas are sparking from that kind of approach. That's where they get the inspiration from. Where else would they get? So when it comes to training and crafts, I mentioned World of Warcraft before. World of Warcraft's enchant system or crafting system is very simple when it comes to enchanting someone else's item piece. You open a trade window, and there's a little slot where you put one item in. And in that slot, that item is not traded, but the other person can put a craft onto that. And then he can pay for the fee, and they can both accept, and the transaction will go over, and the craft that he put in that will be shown, and that went over. And that could be a pretty cool way to do when you open a trade window, and in the trade window will be a little button to say, well, open up your bench craft or open up your hoarded crafting station, and you put that, and the other player would see that, okay, the item I have here is not going to be traded. It's now clearly showing that he's going to give me augment influence, and I'll give him a fee, and then, okay, everything looks good. We'll click both accept, and I know what I'm paying for, and I get that. That would be a great solution without giving it an auction house, without itemizing the crafts, and it would also prevent scamming and stuff like that.
And it could be merged with the crafting bench as well, which would double, because then, like, I had so many people, for example, this league ask me, hey, man, can I have life as ES? I would literally just type, all right, guys, the floodgates are open, and my PoE would lag because nobody wants to do betrayal. Like, a lot of people don't understand, or like they don't know where recipes come from. Even though it's simple, they don't know. So multi-mod, I think you can see these on the crafting bench, but every time I try to search for crafting mods I don't have, my interface bugs and doesn't show me anything.
You can't search for them, I think. I'd have to verify.
You have to like scroll down and hover over
and find
it. Okay, it's weird.
I'm gonna verify it.
Yeah, but that would work as well. And there are multi-exalt crafts in there regardless, right? Like multi-mod is 2 exalt, so they could put the item in. They see me select multi-mod. Yeah, they put it in, and it would be nice, honestly. But we'll see.
Yeah, no, if I search for extra in the crafting bench, the undiscovered or veiled doesn't show up. Because I don't have that craft, by the way. But if I scroll down in veiled, I can see life with extra energy. I can't even search the undiscovered ones.
See, that's what I mean. I feel like a lot of their quality of life, they are neglecting to update because they know people don't read. But in reality, I think a lot of people don't read because they have tried to read and can't find an answer. So then they just don't. Yeah. That's how I am. I just blame a lot of things in PoE on bugs.
That's fair. That's fair. It does remind me of a certain somebody who's not streaming anymore. He said that Path of Exile is holding quality of life hostage, and we've got into the state of I was about to say slavery, but we got this state of mind where we are like finding ourselves accepting this, and as soon as they give us a little bit of quality of life, the entire community just goes in a roar, being like, yes, quality of life, that's amazing. And and in reality, it's like this should have been in the game 8 years ago. It's 2022 now. Where the fuck was this quality of life? Should have been there ages ago. Hello. But I don't know. I mean, it's a good business model for GGG because they don't have to do much to make the community happy. Oh, we just destroyed everything, but we're gonna give you this little small quality of life, and everyone's gonna be like, "Yeah, it's about time."
Yep.
Oh man. But then again,
do you see what I mean? Like, you can't even search for an undiscovered modifier.
Yeah.
Who is going to do that? When you go to the crafting bench and a guide tells you to craft something, you're going to type that craft in. And then it doesn't show. And then you scroll because you have it typed in and you can't find it. So what are you going to do next? You're going to go ask a streamer or you're going to Google it.
Yep.
So it's just, yeah.
And again, putting the burden on the content creators to provide the knowledge and information. And it's just this vicious circle, right? Because it's always going to put that pressure on us. And we're expected to provide this information and consistently provide that information to them because GGG just refuses to. And, you know, I remember when they introduced the actual tutorial in game, like you actually have a tutorial-ish information board or whatever that wasn't in the game before.
Yeah.
I mean, the game's been out for years and now we got it. And people were like, oh, that's crazy. What was the Dangyo, whatever it was, the gloves, the fish scale, what was the name of them?
I forgot, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, of the skill or something. Dang gloves, the sky, I don't even remember. But it's like, people were like super hyped about it. And then the fish scale gauntlets, yeah. But the problem was, you know, most people don't even click it, and I guess that as the absolute newest players, they kind of go in and check it out, I guess. But we also have heard from Chris saying that most people that are playing the game, they are returning players. When they have a new peak of players, the majority of those people that made that peak are returning players, not new players. And that just goes to show that's like that they don't really value putting that type of information in the game, I guess, because of that analytic. That's the only way I can see it. But having things like a glossary and, like you mentioned, with like little I button, just hover over it and it'll explain the craft, that's not much to ask for.
I really think, and I'm playing, I don't even know if this is devil's advocate, but think about it this way. If you just like throw a tutorial in someone's face when they first start playing a game, 95% of players are going to read the first letter, see that it's T, and exit out of it immediately. And if it pops up again in your face, you're probably going to stop and try to figure out how to turn it off. It's all about the way you inject information. Let's use an example. If I started up my stream right now with no information and my title said, playing Raid Shadow Legends at 10 p.m. tonight, and I gave no information about it, I have these banners all over my stream. My chatbot is just posting Raid Shadow Legends every 4 seconds. Every 14 minutes, I'm pressing a Raid Shadow Legends commercial. My community is going to be pissed off, right? But if I say, for example, started off with like, have you ever spiked to 9,999 ping in Path of Exile? Does your instance just randomly close? Are you sick of going to players' hideouts and your game just shitting itself? Well, have no fear. NordVPN is here, right? If you bring it in a funny way, you're a lot more likely to get a person to just click for 1 second. All they need to do is click that glossary, and you've already gotten one person to read. They don't need to read more than 2 seconds. It is now injected into their brain that there is a glossary that they can click, that at some point in time they will when they get frustrated. And it's all about, in my opinion, the way you inject the information for players to use. You cannot just simply provide the information and then post demographics and say, yeah, nobody uses it. That's not really fair, in my opinion.
I completely agree with that. It's very similar to how you were projecting this from a streamer perspective. Because like when we do promotions, it's, you know, we do our best to please, you know, the community and the sponsors as well. We do it in a funny way and make a fun story out of it, and that's a good way to approach it. And that goes the same way in games, like you mentioned, with how it's projected and how it's perceived by the people as well. But just making sure that people understand that there is something they can go to. And I agree with that with the tutorial, because I think most people that play ARPG games, they have played, or before they play PoE, they probably have played an ARPG before. Torchlight, Diablo 3 for the Zoomers and Gen Z kids, and Diablo 2 and Diablo 1, for example, for the boomers, right? And that's fine. That's great. We already have. So when I started playing PoE, of course, I didn't actually start with reading up things. I was like, yeah, dude, I'll play the RPGs. I know what's up. Open up the skill tree. I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at? Okay, gems. I gotta learn these systems, right? And then you learn because it's simple enough, because it's an RPG. But the game has come a long way from when I started playing. And there's just so much information out there. And there's a lack of guidance in it. And everything just forces us off to content creators or YouTube or Wikipedia to start learning it. And baseline information should be presented in an easy digestible way so that the newer players can consume it without needing to go off screen. People talked about having trade in game, like a trade window in game, rather than having to tab out to another website to trade. Like, we didn't even have trade officially on the Path of Exile website. We had to go to POE.trade to trade. Many years ago as well. So I don't know, it's like it's all about how they promote it, right? And I like the idea of having quick and easy digestible information, such as the little I button, you know, bench craft. Well, it could be a little button each time you click on a craft before you apply it. There's be an I button show up, hover over it, it'll tell you like a quick TLDR of it, and you'll get the gist of it at least. You don't have to you know, go through the methods like, well, this will happen if you do this, or this will happen if you do that. But, you know, if you put a metacraft, it should tell you, well, you can't use fossils or essences on this if you have a metacraft on it. And, you know, this will safeguard or whatever the mods is there and stuff like that. Just a couple sentences, so you're done. That's it. So that's not much to ask for. And I think that's something that's really important, because I feel that lately GGG has been catering so much to the veteran PoE players, but also a lot to the aspirational content hunters with uber content, new endgame bosses. And I love this because I am one of those players, and I'm sure you are as well, that when it comes to enjoying it, that fact, right? Obviously you're one of the top players, but I'm just saying that you might also be in the same boat where we're enjoying getting this in content because it's catering to us. But that's not healthy for the overall health of the game and the community, because there can't be a 1% player base without the majority of the player base not being in the 1% player base. We need those players as well. And the same thing for trade when it comes to those environments, because of the ecosystem of how trade works. The 1% players get fed by the casual players, and the scraps and bubblegum currency generated and supply of crafted items supplied by the 1% player base is then fed back to the casual players, and it's just a healthy ecosystem of it. But if you take away one of those portions, then, you know, they all get hurt by it. And I think that we've been catered to enough, and it's time for GGG to actually start looking into catering to the new and newer players as much as they have to the 1%ers, if you will.
Yep. I mean, my entire content is based on new players, 100%. I would say after Ritual League, I kind of took a step down from trying to go after really crazy chase stuff, because it started burning me out. It's fun, but it started burning me out, and I now just really enjoy just making a character and progressing my Atlas. Now I love the new Atlas system. I love doing restarts and just progressing again. It's so much fun to me. Not even touching the uber content. I really don't. I like that they're in the game. I just personally don't really care to do them. I love killing monsters and mapping, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, my whole entire guide is about getting you through the campaign, getting you into early maps, and progressing into being able to face tank content. And I get so many people that just don't understand basic things in PoE that I really feel they could make, like, since they already have a tutorial that pops up in your face, why not, for example, do this? Every single time you start a new, like every 3 months, right? They could basically flag our account and like reset something, which like triggers the tutorial again. But if you are already, like you already have the mod, like the little thing checked, so you don't have the tutorial pop up, then that doesn't matter to you. But for newer players, the first time you use an Orb of Fusing on an item that's not 20% quality, it could just pop up and say, hey, by the way, just remember that increasing the quality on items increases your chance to link, right? Just very basic stuff. Yeah. Or anytime they use, say, 15 chromatic orbs on a piece of gear, just 15, right? Something very easy. Hey, don't forget that the colors of the item are tied directly to the attribute requirement. You know, and then they just give a tiny little example, just like little short, not even a paragraph, just like 2 lines of information with a picture. Or say, for example, the first time you use a Metacraft mod that's in Exalt, don't forget, these specific modifiers do not interact with meta mods. What is it? Essence and Fossil. Just like very, very basic things that when things pop up in your face and you're like not doing anything, right? I mean, what are the chances of you just randomly being in Act 2 in the middle of fighting Oak and you just transmute your, or chrome your gear 15 times? It's pretty unlikely, right? You're going to be in town crafting your gear where you're more likely to read. Part of the reason why no one wants to read the tutorial is there's a zombie in your face, you punch it, you get a skill gem, and the game says, wait, please read this paragraph. Nobody wants to do that. You want to go try it, right? Yeah. So I really think that these little things would help so much. For people who don't like it, you just skip forever. It's gone, right? But for newer players, I think it's, like you said, it's these hidden mechanics that people don't realize. Okay, here's another one. The first time you put a piece of energy shield gear on, this one might not be good because it would be in combat. Don't forget that having even one energy shield gives you 50% chance to avoid stun. That's big, right? Yeah. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, no, I think it's there's a lot of these things we talked about, easily digestible provided information, right? And obviously we have auto equip. You loot energy. Well, let's say you loot a chain belt. You're in the middle of a pack of zombies, and bam, there's a tutorial popping up. You know, I think most people get annoyed by that, but that's again, even in those rare situations, because that normally only happens in the early stage of the game anyways. And being provided with an easily digestible information is key for people to actually bother reading it. And I think that's the biggest problem, right? Instead of having this paragraph of information, they get the possibility to find the stuff. And it could also be a little note saying you can find this information and more in our tutorial. Click here to check it out, or go to the help button or whatever. And then it can go there and be like, well, I couldn't read that because I'm in a fight, but I learned from the previous time I got this pop-up that, you know, I can go there and check it out. So I can go in and check and see, oh, okay, so that's what matters. Okay, so that's what it does. So that's pretty interesting. Do you keep 50% stun avoidance when ES is over mana? That's a good question. I'm pretty sure it still works, no?
I have no clue, to be honest.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Oh, man.
I mean, ES protects your life, and if ES is protecting your mana, it's not protecting your life. So mechanically, it may be different, but I truly don't know.
Well, I was thinking with Mind Over Matter, obviously, because if it's not Mind Over Matter, then it's not part of your EHP. But if you're using
think of
Mind
it like
Over
this,
Matter,
though. Even if you have Mind Over Matter, stun is still based off of your health, not your mana pool. So if ES is not protecting your life, I feel like it could go both ways.
Yeah.
Right? It's still a defensive layer, but it's not protecting your life. But mana is protecting your life, which means it is, but it's not directly protecting it. So I don't know.
Well, the calculation is you get X amount of damage, which is then mitigated by Y defenses, resulting in C damage. And in that equation, the damage that is hitting your mana, in this case energy shield with the EB bomb strat, is a result that comes after your mitigation is done, and then it's split, right? So that then it shouldn't cover your, then it should not give you the stun layer.
I'm gonna say it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm in that boat as well. That's a really good question. I love getting questions where I actually have to think. Jesus, mostly it's like, well, does fire damage scale as rest damage? No, it doesn't. That's kind of the question, like, because we get these so many times, but every now and then, I'm sure you get that as well. Like every now and then, once in a blue moon, you get a question that is like,
yeah,
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I'm just sure you have several thousand hours in the game, just like me, like tons and tons of thousands of hours, and we're still learning. That's the crazy part with Path of Exile, right? It's just a never-ending school, if you will. I remember actually. Sorry?
You go.
No, I just remember when I graduated the POE school in the POE university. We ran out, everyone's going crazy. It's just crazy. Lots of drinks. It was good seeing you coming over, Pox. You graduated a couple of years before me. It's a good time, and it's like everyone's like, "Oh, we're finally done. We don't have to study anymore. We can finally play the game." And the first thing we did was like, okay, I started up the game, and the first thing I had to do was start going through my books that I had through the years I was studying in the university. And it's like, okay, ES covering energy shield and stun, going through that. It's like it just never stops. It's just crazy.
Yeah, you can seriously write books on subjects of Path of Exile. It's kind of crazy. No, I was gonna say, talking about finding new things, I actually think there's 2 shields that are worth 1 chaos that overtake Rise of the Phoenix. And typically a lot of people were like, always Rise of the Phoenix, always Rise of the Phoenix. On's Heritage, the trash can lid shield that I saw last league, is actually such a good shield for 1C for RF, because I mean, think about it. A lot of people are kind of fixated on like max fire res RF, but you don't die to fire damage. Actually, you die to fireball skellies because they're so insane. I don't know why, but it's much better to have like an even balance of all res. So On's Heritage is like 100 life, 1k armor, 2 max all res. That's crazy for 1C.
Yeah, and it just defeats the purpose of endurance charges. But doesn't that come in line with how, when Ubereld and stuff like that was introduced in the old school way of playing, Righteous Fire has always been surrounding endo charge stacking? Like, that was one of the ways we played, and then somebody see the shield.
I never played that meta.
Oh, actually.
Shit. Yeah, it's a lot of misconception, but I played RF Berserker in hardcore, got to 100. Then I played some more RF Berserker, and then I got bored of RF Berserker, so I started playing Low Life Guardian. And I played that so much. I'm talking about when your AoE with Conk Effect to do Shaper was like this is your this is your character size, and this is your RF. It was, you literally had to touch the boss with your face to do damage. And I played that for like a year, and I just kept remaking low life RF characters. I made like a low life RF Magic Find Guardian, and then I was like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm sick of having to juggle all these auras with reservation, so I stopped. And then I think I stopped playing RF for a little bit, and during that was Jug RF era, and I did not play it at all. I never played the 12k life, endurance charge stacking, Combs Way. I looked at it, but I never played it. I don't know why. I had no part of that meta whatsoever. Then I came back to try to play the Jug meta, and I was like, I don't want to do this. This is too slow for me. I don't like it. Then I made Inquisitor, and the whole game changed.
Yeah, I remember the Jug era was one of the smoothest ways to trivialize content. That's always been the way you play endgame bosses, is to trivialize endgame bosses. In trade, it's all about surging the damage. Not so much with the aspirational content, because we actually need defensive layers now with wave 30 sim use and pure stones and stuff like that. It's actually a really good way to force softcore players to actually start doing defensive layers. I love that approach a lot. But the way we trivialized the Elder fight was Count's Roots for the slow, and stack up as much armor and endurance charge and physical damage mitigation as possible. Because what then happens was that we present ourselves with a way where you could tank the Elder and Shaper slams, and the tentacles didn't do anything. So the fight was just, it was just a rock in a wheelchair rolling around like, I gotta go to Shaper now. Okay, he's immune. I gotta roll over to Elder. You know, that's all they did, because
you got your
die.
What is it, Forbidden Taste, like a 9,000 health flask that you could just press whenever you want as well.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Yeah,
absolutely.
How do you feel about the current defensive layers in Path of Exile?
Well, I think that after the 315 idiocracy, if you will, I think that they really made armor worth bothering properly. I love that, and still people don't understand that your armor says physical damage mitigation. It's not accurate, because the physical damage mitigated is depending on how hard the hit is. So if you get hit, sorry,
there's one line in that tag that gives that away that no one ever reads. Chad, do you know what it is? It is your estimated physical damage reduction. They need to highlight, italicize, underline, red bold text that one specific line right there.
That's pretty nutty. But I think that in general, defensive layers right now are better than before, even if they're in the same category as many other things we've had in certain categories in the game, where everyone is using a certain something. Like racing and hardcore trade, it was BV or EK Nova. That's the two things you raced with in hardcore trade. Some people did some Spork sometimes, but in general, those were like the two best ways, and that was the best ways to level for the longest time. And it's the same thing with the current meta of racing with DD, for example, being obnoxiously good and have been for a very long time as well. But that aside, defense layers have now entered that scenario as well, where the best ways to go for is essentially Determination, Defiance Banner, and Grace if you want to go real crazy with it. And outside of that, you have other methods that are super good, like ES builds, low life, or CI builds in general. You'd be stupid not to use an Aegis Aurora. It's just simple as that, because it is so goddamn good. It's the best shield in the entire game, hands down.
Yes.
If I'm happy with it, I am actually, because there are other ways to generate a reliable, trustworthy defensive layer without using that. An example could be the Dark Pact build that I love playing. You get them, you actually run with Petrified Blood, low life approach, and you create a state of overleeching, and you also have Energy Shield Leech on top of that. So it's a hybrid build, and it doesn't even use Determination or Defiance Banner. It doesn't even use Grace, and it doesn't use anything but high block cap and getting enough EHP to reliably handle these things. But it also has the perk of having an army of minions soaking up aggro, so you don't get hit that much. But the sustain on that build is absolutely insane. But because of not running Determination, Defiance Banner, it is possible to get one shot, not frequently, but the risk of that is higher because you're not stacking up that much armor. But if I'm happy with the defensive layer, I would say that I am. I actually think that the defensive layers is in a position where I feel like my min-max character that I do once a league is actually going defensively, which I haven't done in the longest time in PoE, and I think that's amazing. Are you not happy with it?
So I am happy, but I am bored. So I will explain as much detail as I can, which is usually over explaining. So I am definitely an Inquisitor fanboy. I don't really play on hit builds. I love sustain, aka regeneration. So I played a Jug Bone Shatter build last league, SSF, went to like 94, loved it. Hated bossing on melee. Regardless, Jug felt really good with its defenses. I was very happy. Leech was not really something that I was using unless I was actually taking damage, but I wasn't, so I liked it. I tried to play an Elementalist, and here is where my personal problem occurs. I love the State of Determination. I think it's kind of crazy how many people are using it, but it makes sense. It's literally, it's physical damage mitigation. We did not have this outside of Flasks and Conversion before. Yeah. So I really like that. I really like Grace, although I hate getting 155 decks. My problem, though, is if I try to play right side of the tree, because I typically play sustain builds, I find it to be too difficult to get started with my defensive layers. And this is, you know, I'm a noob when it comes to the right side of the tree. I'll give you an example. I play Inquisitor, I get Determination in Act 3, and I feel like it's making a difference right away. I feel it. If I play right side of the tree and I get Evasion, Evasion feels good. Don't get me wrong. It's good, but I need that spell suppression to back it up. With the left side of the tree, I feel I can get more overall HP than the right side. So say I kill Katava, I have maybe an extra 20% life on the right side. That 20% life goes to the buffer towards elemental damage. On the right side, I have to be spell suppression cap. I can't always get that right away. Like, don't get me wrong, I know you can definitely get spell suppression cap easily, but the point is more like having Determination and having 50% spell suppression. I know they're not comparable, but Determination, I can feel the 50%, like the armor all the time. Spell suppression, I wish they could make it so the suppression is always active, but investing in a spell suppression brings the value of suppressed damage up. So that way, even if you have a little bit of spell suppression, it would just feel like you have spell suppression rather than it being like either you have it and you're overpowered or you don't have it and you get one shot. I want more in between. Like, I want something to feel better for newer players, right?
So you're saying instead of having a % chance to suppress damage, you're talking about adding damage mitigation for spell suppressed, essentially. So you basically are you can suppress damage, but you increase the mitigation instead. So instead of 50%, it starts at 0, and you invest into a node, you increase in damage. It's mitigated.
Yes, and it goes up, right? And they could even have a keystone maybe for that specifically, right? Just because it doesn't feel good to rely on something gimmicky. And a lot of people will say it's not gimmicky, just get 100%. If you're a new player and you're trying to understand PoE and you're trying to craft basic gear, you don't have 100% spell suppression unless you have like 10 or 15 points into spell suppression. and then you probably have like 3k life and all this other stuff. And I am not like hating on spell suppression in any way. I'm more so bringing in consistency to spell suppression, right? Again, if we talk about left side of tree versus right side, left side you have easier access to max res, easier access to armor, easier access to strength, which is health, easier access to like actual solid mitigation, which makes your build feel more consistent. Right side of the tree feels it's a lot more advanced. You are much more reliant on just numerous factors, I feel, before your build gets comfy. Of course, experienced players don't fit in this boat, but it's more so for like the newer player progression, right?
But it's like you said before, like your content similar to mine is focusing on new players and new player experience and helping those people out. And when we're talking about things that we want to see changed in the game, we're both in the same boat as well, where we're advocating heavily towards changes and improvements that is helping the new players. Because we don't need help in the top end. We have a lot, we've gotten enough, and we're looking to do that, and that's what we're talking about. Just everyone in chat, and then when you guys watch on YouTube will see this as well. I think that the other aspects of like defensive layers, I wanted to mention Defiance Banner a bit, because Defiance Banner is absolutely disgusting how good it is, especially in combination with Determination and Grace, because it has 30 up to 49% increased armor and evasion. And this is crazy for minions as well, because minions have a base armor and base evasion, but we never really scale evasion unless we're running Grace. And Defiance Banner gives a ton of this, and the base evasion minions have is crazy. Like, you can make them so tanky, it's absolutely disgusting. But when it comes to evasion, that's another one of those things that we could use a glossary for, to be honest, because most people don't know that they have an entropy system. And most people that know that don't even know what the entropy system actually does. So, I mean, it just goes to show the problem with that. And that also emphasizes on the idea that if you have evasion to evade attacks, and you know about the entropy system, you are still forced to back that up with the spell suppression for the casting. Because you can get hit by physical damage from a cast, but if you have armor scale, you get a fist hit, because the fist ones are actually the ones that are mostly scared, because there's modifiers on maps like physical damage added as extra elemental. You can mitigate quite a lot of the physical damage portion from these things, but the elemental damage has to be mitigated from other sources, obviously. But if you're having the entropy in a situation where the biggest hit that's coming from a pack of enemy will hit you, and you don't have spell suppression, you are dead. End of story. But if you're running something like hybrid builds, a bit of armor, a bit of energy shield, or evasion, sorry, you have the armor approach to it, you can have your rest capped, but if you're on the left-hand side of the tree, your HP can cover for the hits, which the right side can't, but needs to be covered for those specific spell hits from the spell suppression. I already lost where I was going. I hope what I said made sense.
No, I got you. I got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
you're agreeing to an extent, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, then yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I lost halfway through my sentence.
Yeah, it's just difficult, I find, to feel comfortable defensive layers in PoE. It's easy to jump into what we're used to, but it's hard to find something, not even something new, but just try something different for yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, what's the solutions then? I mean, yeah, okay, the defensive layers are boring, like you mentioned, to put it in a good way.
Sorry. I never really provided my solution. My solution was, so I think Aegis should deserve a slight nerf, like a little bit of a nerf. Like they could nerf like 1 or 2% of the max cold. And I'm not saying they should do this. I'm just thinking out loud, right? Like nerf like 1 or 2% of the max cold res to make it harder to bring in line with melding. Even if you're 88 all res, you're so tanky, right? That's fine. And maybe like 1%. What is the current armor based off max block? The 2.5% of your armor,
isn't it?
They should lower that by like 20% or so. It's obnoxious. It's so good. It's so good.
Like the A's Roar replenishing.
Yeah, just lower the replenish 2%. A little bit. It's yeah, okay. So make it like 1.5% or something.
Yeah,
that's fine. It'll still live, right?
Yeah.
I think that I would like to see new like more. I don't know if I want more end game uniques or end game keystones or just something that adds cooler, or not cooler, but something that can compete with spell suppression and Aegis melding. We have Transcendence, but new players and not even experienced players, Transcendence is so, it's just very different to build, completely different in every type of way. I would like to see just more rather than them just nerf what we have and not provide extra stuff. Like at some point they added spell suppression, right? Like I think that the way PoE is being pushed, there's more automation with all of these things happening, especially Arc Nemesis. We can't react to all of this stuff going on, and I think it would be cool to just have like something else on top of it, right?
I think that for people to get some context on Aegis Aurora, because I think not everyone fully understands how broken Aegis actually is. We're not talking about Divine Shield Keystone to even add more to it. So what's really good with Aegis Aurora is that it has a really decent amount of energy shield. You can get between 200 250 pretty easily on the energy shield front, but it also brings you about 1,000 up to 1,300 armor on top of this. And what's really cool with it is that it replenishes 2% of your armor as energy shield when you block. This is equivalent to the Surrender's 250 life on block, or the percent life or percent energy shield on block. And why this is so good is because most people with life-based in softcore, obviously, they have 5, maybe 6,000 HP. And if you have 5,000 HP, you're going to be in a situation where a perfectly roll life recovery on block is going to give you 250 life on the block. A bit more if you have 6,000 HP, of course. However, the Aegis Aurora gives you so much armor that if you have your flask, which is kind of fundamental in today's state of Path of Exile, you're going to have, say, 50,000 energy shield. 50,000 armor. And if you have 50,000 armor, Aegis Aurora doesn't give you 250 life on block. It gives you 1,000 energy shield on block, which is insane. It's absolutely crazy. And higher builds will have even more. But you can lower your armor quite a lot, and it will still give you more ES on block than a percent energy shield on block rare shield crafted with this. And that would still not be good, better than an Aegis, because the Aegis doesn't just give you energy shield, it also gives you that armor that helps mitigate, and we already talked about how important armor is. So yes, lowering that even by 50% down to 1% would still make it extremely good. And you can combine this obviously with things like the Divine Shield, which doesn't let you recover any shield above your armor, which is fine. But you also get 3% of physical damage prevented to be regenerated over the next 4 seconds as energy shield, which is why hybrid builds or CI or low life builds using Aegis and Divine Shield is just so tanky. The sustain is obnoxious. And I don't know, it just kind of feels like the old school times. You remember when, you know, Chevron's Wrappings was selling for like 100x? Because it was so goddamn good. Everybody used it.
I like that. I like when uniques are rare but still have a value to them because it brings excitement. I like it. I like the nerf to the drop rate on Ashes and Omni, even though I don't run them and I don't run the invitations, because even for a new player, I try to tell people all the time, if you're complaining about farming currency, you can literally run white tier 14, tier 15, tier 16 maps, get your map return, and just put in a new map and keep doing it, and you will literally get a minimum of 1 exalt per hour just selling your invitation.
Yeah.
Way more, but like minimum, bare minimum, 1 exalt per hour. It as a money-making method for people who don't want to craft, want to turn their brain off and kill mobs, and it adds like a gambling slot simulator for high-end people who want to kill those bosses, and then it brings even more value to double corrupting to make it more even niche, or even more niche.
Yeah. Speaking of pushing the Eldritch content, something I've noticed a lot lately is a lot of people complaining about them dying a lot. And I look at the character and I'm looking at it and I'm seeing they're doing it well. The PUB is good, the defense is nice, and I don't understand why they're dying. And a couple weeks back, I started understanding why. I was wondering if you've had that same experience. And that is people playing like a low or a medium body build version, and their character and everything looks perfect. They have exactly what they need, but they're still getting one shot. And then you're looking into it, and apparently people are running nodes on the Atlas tree that are new for this league, right? With Wrath of the Cosmos and Eldritch Gaze. And it's like, and that's what's killing them. Because like, I have my min-max character has just under 5 mirrors, 4.5, 5 mirrors invested. It is a fucking mountain of a character. It is crazy how good this build is. I get one shot in tier 16 maps left and right. Like if I go Eldritch Gaze, I have an overcapped cold res, and I pop a lower cold res Eldritch Gaze altar. My rest goes from 116 down to 56. I enter harvest, a cold snap occurs. I'm dead in 3 seconds if I don't react. Like, it's crazy. Plus the increased damage taken from Wrath of the Cosmos. And with defensive layers being talked about quite a lot, I love that there is content that makes the game so insanely hard. Obviously, it's rewarding, but it makes the game very, very rewarding for the challenge provided. And that's something I've been having troubles with PoE, where the challenge doesn't always isn't equal to the reward provided. And in this case, I feel like they've actually really hit the point with these things. But it also shows that some of these are pretty crazy, and I'm sure that's crazy for Righteous Fireballs. You know, you get a minus fire rest. I mean, you're not going to have a good time if you do that. But it brings in the topic of melding, because I was going to run a melding on this character, but every time I ran maps, my rest was cut in half. So instead of going melding, which would lower my rest and put more pressure on getting more resistance, I was like, oh, fuck this. I'm just going to make sure I'm overcapped on all my resistances so I can put these altars on. And I still go below the 80% cold rest I have with Aegis because of that. So I don't see why I would invest into melding because of those things. But obviously you can, but it would put even more pressure on resistances. But what do you think of melding's overpoweredness, if you will, with that in mind?
I mean, I like that melding gets hit a little harder, I guess, with that than other builds, because you're trying to already stack so much res. I don't know. I like melding. I do. I think it's too strong. But I think it's too strong because there's not anything contesting it. You have Transcendence, melding, and spell suppression. And melding can go with spell suppression, which makes it even more overpowered. I would just like to see another candidate kind of pop in, because I already think that melding is in a good spot with the sense of it's cool because it allows you to utilize resistances better. I think the past few years, too many veteran Path of Exile players and newer Path of Exile players don't understand the value of elemental resistance. If you run Purity of Elements, you get a shit ton of res. Getting a shit ton of res means you can have offensive suffixes, like dot multi on rings for RF, right? Resistance is more than just resistance. And I really like that, because melding is not just taking away your resistance. It's taking away potential damage suffixes, right? It's taking away potential chaos res. So I really like it for that. However, I do not like the design of any of the keystones on the Atlas that make you take increased damage at all. I look at this from a very... well, I don't like it because it promotes the I have 6 portals, that is my defensive layer. That's the only reason why I don't like it. It's bringing more income to people who are kind of like using more of a half-ass, like say you're playing a tornado shot build that has like 3k life, max evasion, and nothing else, right? And you never level past 95, and you're just going through and just insta-killing content, clicking every altar, don't care what it does, making more currency than other people because you are choosing to neglect defensive layers, and you're okay with clearing your maps faster but dying occasionally. But that's okay, because that is also part of Path of Exile. It's not the part that I engage in. I respect it because it is a part of Path of Exile, but it's not the way I can play it, right?
No, that's fair. That's fair. I think in general, I'm happy with how the keystones are creating this aspirational state of the game where it hurts certain approaches, because I think melding is overpowered. I really do. But as soon as you start pumping Eldritch Gaze, it's still OP, but you can't take the rest reductions, which you're completely locked away from potentially very rewarding features of a map. Because if you do, your entire approach of running melding, which takes a lot of effort, like especially if you want to push a lot of Rs, you have to start going clusters for it and all of that jazz, and it becomes kind of hard. And if you click that node, all of that currency invested, all of that work is completely useless for the rest of that map, right? And that doesn't happen every map, obviously, but I like that that kind of gate keeps you away from those rewards, if you will, because of how strong it is. But obviously it's not enough. And I agree with you with having generic damage like Wrath of the Cosmos feels a bit so. I'm not going to notice if the monster's going to do 25% more damage. Like my build in the state that I have it, it's either one shot or I'm not going to die.
Not, yeah.
And, you know, we talked about this several times throughout the years in PoE, to be honest, where you don't really react to things to stay away from dying. There's very few situations. You're either dying and you have no idea why you died, or you're immortal. So this whole reaction where your skill base is keeping you alive only happens on extremely deterministic damage sources, like certain betrayal encounters, mostly the endgame bosses. They have these deterministic, well telegraphed is the word I was looking for, the abilities that you can dodge that is essentially granting a situation where you could die. Because most people goes with block or evasion, right? And, there's a 25% chance that I'm going to take a damage from that, and that might kill me. But it's only 25% chance. So I can just sit and tank and see, throw the dice, right? Well, we've been at it for a bit over 2 hours now. Don't want to keep you. I know you say we're going to go live as well. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Any topics or anything you want to bring up? Or
No, I think we covered quite a bit. I'm pretty happy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right, let's just wrap this up then. So for those of you who haven't seen it, or for those of you who tune in the middle of it, this will be uploaded on the YouTube, on my YouTube channel. These sit-down podcasts are designed to just be me calling up a friend, and Pox is a good friend of mine. We've been at it in PoE for 8 years. He's been at it for 10, and it's just good to talk to you, Pox. It's really happy to have you as a friend and be able to talk to you in general. I mean, it's been so many years, and it's just crazy. That's basically it. We don't really have any topics when we're on these shows. They basically just call a friend up, and this time it was Pox, and we just choose to talk about a game or two, and we'll just see where the conversation leads. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Pox is going ham with Righteous Fire this league, but Pox, could you perhaps do a shout out for yourself? Where can we find you? What are you up to? What's your next project? Yada yada.
Yeah, so you can find me at twitch.tv/Pox. You could also Google Righteous Fireman or just Pox is my YouTube. Actually, it's 0HXP, but just type in Pox in the Google search window and it'll pop it up. Other than that, doing an SSF restart right now, so we're on like day 3 of Righteous Fire. Intentionally progressing a bit slower than usual, so newer players have more of a chance to kind of understand what's happening. But yeah, that's pretty much about it.
Sounds good. Quick question: is Burning Man, is that inspired? Is that Pox inspired?
No, that's just that's something else entirely.
All right, because I was so certain that they saw you on Twitch and were like, yeah, this sounds pretty cool. We're gonna make sure we get an event around this. Jokes aside, make sure you check Pox out. He's gonna be live streaming some Righteous Fire today as well, so go check him out on Twitch and his YouTube channel, and anything Righteous Fire related or other things related as well, as both of us are focusing a lot of content for new players. I know we have a lot of people in here that is following my content. Make sure you give Pox a good check as well on his content. There's a lot of useful information. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in for the podcast. Hope you guys had fun, and thanks to you, Pox, for joining in. Appreciate that, man.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it, man.
All right, boys, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, yada yada, follow the YouTube meta, and leave a comment, all those things. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe, keep rocking.